Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Eneasz Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
I'm Jay Sticky.
And we have a guest with us today. Levi, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Levi Barrett.
Hello, Levi. Levi is Ferb on the Discord, and we have invited him here today to talk about labor law. Specifically because I don't know, I have discovered that I don't know what the hell unions are or how they work or why. And there seems to be stuff going down in the U.S. right now that could have big effects. I'm thinking specifically about the big railroad strike that is scheduled, maybe? Question mark.
Yeah.
And and we'll probably get more into that later as the repercussions of what we're talking about. But before all that, I want to know even what the hell it is we're talking about, because I get the feeling I was lied to a lot in my high school social studies classes.
So the basics of unions are, it's kind of hard to explain depending on the time period, but assuming we're talking about now, it's basically just a group of people who vote to form an organization, and then they collectively negotiate with management at a company for their contract. So they all have the same contract.
That's what I had been taught too, but then a whole bunch of other stuff cropped up as far as I could tell.
Yeah.
So
I feel like if it were just that, people wouldn't be so up in arms. Trying to protect unions or anti-union.
Yeah.
At its purest, that's I think what it sounds like. I'm not an expert either, but I think the idea is that instead of having all the power be at the top where management says you do this, you have to do that, fuck you, the workers are all look, we've all decided that you can't screw with us.
Yeah.
And so it's an inversion of the power dynamic where if the management wants to screw with one person, it's well, then we've all prepared to walk,
And that's awesome.
Yeah.
I always thought it was great.
Heroic,
Yeah.
The downside,
Absolutely.
I guess, would only be if you didn't want to walk when the rest of the union did because you like getting paid. But that's part of the part of the pros and cons.
But I started hearing some things about unions which really confused me. So I had a bunch of questions to ask about this sort of thing first.
How unions are since the 1950s is basically how unions are. But if you go before 1950, things get very weird and very different.
We can stick with post-1950 then for sure.
No.
Just because it's just more relevant to whatever's
I think
happening
the history could be
I was
interesting.
gonna say I kind of want to hear the history. I realized we asked, hey, how would you describe unions, and then we didn't let you answer.
I was kind of done with my description. It was that simple.
Okay.
I guess my first question is, am I ever forced by the government to work if I'm not in the military? Because it sounds like the government can say you have to come to work, and that seems really fucked up to me. That's basically slavery, right? Is that slavery?
Wage slavery?
No,
Yep.
wage slavery is a term for I have to pay my bills and therefore I'm a slave, which I think is silly.
This is actual wage slavery.
Yeah.
It's slavery, but you do get paid for it.
Right, yeah. So is there things where the government can force you to work?
In some cases, yes. Like we were talking about the railroad strike. If that goes through, they will probably try to force them to go back to work anyway. Probably by threat of force using the military.
How the fuck is that remotely legal under U.S. law to force people to work?
At gunpoint.
At gunpoint,
That'd be awesome. I mean, that'd be terrible, but what a picture that would be on the newspaper.
Well, the reason, with railroads specifically, is in the past when railroads have gone on strike, they've come very close to overthrowing the government. So they've decided railroads just can't strike, or if they can, it's very limited.
Would have been in a time when the alternative was horses, right?
Well, as late as the 1920s, this was going on.
Okay, but I mean, it's still you couldn't transport large amounts of goods across the country otherwise.
I mean, you still can't.
Well,
Trucks
trucks
exist,
now,
but it's not enough compared to...
We use trucks a lot.
Yeah, but compared to how many people
really,
and
really large
machines you need.
Yeah, okay.
Why can the government do that? I mean, is it an actual law that says we can just force people to work?
It's one of the laws regarding railroads. I believe it's called the Railroad Labor Law. I can't remember the exact name of it. But yeah, there's a few instances there's the Taft-Hartley Law, which is kind of where unions kind of went completely changed in the 1950s. And basically that made it so if you want to go on strike for specific things, you're not allowed to anymore.
So what things can you go on strike for?
Only things relating to your work. into your specific company. Before that, you could go on strike for political causes, general strikes where they would just like the entire country or the entire city would just shut down and they'd basically take over temporarily. And yeah,
I can totally see why the government would not want to have a rival government made up of unions around, but like, are they? I'm having a hard idea of conceptualizing how this works. Just you, especially in skilled knowledge work, you can't just go to people and say, "Go to work now, or we'll shoot you." Right? Like, how does this even work? Do they say if you don't show up to work, we'll throw you in jail?
yes.
I wonder. I mean, you could probably do like a slowdown. Where you're working, but you're working at like a third the usual speed. Just to infuriate them. Like just find the cusp where they start arresting people.
I mean, I suppose you could quit your. Can you not quit your job?
You can quit your job.
Okay, so you can at least quit your job.
Yeah.
Could you just not show up at your job?
No, they would. I believe they would bring you in, which they have done before.
I'm. This whole thing seems like a gross violation of basic rights, and I have a hard time understanding why people aren't enraged by this and don't know about it.
I assume they sign those rights away when they take the job. Like, I'm not saying that that's cool or whatever, but I doubt it's a surprise to people who work in the industry.
Is that if you, no matter what job you have, or is that only if you're part of a union?
It's only if you're part of a union.
So if I'm not, I guess, on a union's list of members, I can just not go to work and the government can't force me to work?
Yes. Which is kind of the reason that happened.
And this is just for like specific industries like railroad and stuff, right? Like necessary infrastructure,
Yes.
not like King Soopers or whatever had that strike last year. Okay, like that sort of makes sense.
In some
What if,
stores,
like,
like if all like the stores in the town shut down, they might get a little hesitant about it because now people can't get the products.
So if all the store retail unions went on strike, just a general strike, then the government could come in and be like, "Hey, get back to work, or we're throwing you in jail."
Yes.
Society will collapse if you don't do your job for a week. I think that kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Like I'm not saying I'm on board and people should ever be forced to work, but if you sign a contract that says, as long as you know what you're agreeing to, I can see the case for that. Like, I'm not saying I agree with it, but at least it's sensible.
I guess it makes sense if you think of unions not as a collection of employees that are working as a bargaining group against their employer, but rather as another miniature government.
Yeah.
Because you don't rival governments challenging your power.
It is kind of how it operates. I mean, technically, we have like big labor or big union organizations like the AFL-CIO, which is essentially a labor government, but they're not allowed to go on strike for, like I said, political causes or any of that.
Okay. So what? I'm assuming that the unions then have some kind of actual legal presence. There's a law defining what a union is and what rights they have and what things they can't do. It's not just a bunch of people who got together and just said, "We'll talk to the boss as a group," right?
Yeah. Early on, it was like that, where it was just a group of people going up to the boss. But as time progressed, it slowly became more and more a legal framework.
So what makes a union with a capital U actually become a union? Do they have to register with the government or something?
Well, what they have to do is, I believe it's 1/3 of the members have to sign union cards, which triggers a union election. And if 50% of the members vote to join a union, they're formally a union.
And is this union like registered with the government, or where does it exist on paper?
It's registered with the National Labor Relations Board, is what it's called.
And once your union is registered as part of the National Labor Relations Board, what powers and rights do they have that just a group of people themselves wouldn't have?
Well, they can't be fired for any reason. Well, once they're under contract, and they
Holy shit!
Yeah.
Wait! You can't be fired for any reason?
I mean, they can't be just. They're not at will anymore. They can't just be fired because I don't like you.
Oh, okay. So they can be fired, but there has to be some specific
reason.
You can't be fired for no
Paperwork.
reason anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other protections that come with it, like unfair labor practices that they could sue for, which a lot of places are doing right now. Like if they break any, like if they try to restrict the union's freedom, basically, or the workers' freedom.
What are the unfair things that can't be done?
Well, one is like messing with the election itself to form a union, messing with the ability to be informed about the union, spying on the workers, obviously, and other things like that.
What is spying on the workers?
They often do, like, especially in our technical world now, they will spy on the workers and kind of find out if they're thinking about joining a union, and like sometimes bring them into a back room and ask them, "Are you thinking about joining?"
And you're not allowed to ask someone that question?
Yep, it's a protected right.
You can kind of see the adversarial relationship, right?
I mean, it feels weird that you aren't even allowed to ask the question.
I think it's a slippery slope because you could ask in the same breath. Are you thinking of joining a union? We're not big fans of unions around here.
You're fired.
There's
kind
sort
of
of the
the
implied
implication.
threat, yeah.
The implication. Well, it'd be a shame if your hours got cut.
Oh, okay, I see. Yeah.
So I think they just draw a hard, giant line between like management can't talk about unions with employees.
So
Then how does union busting work then? Because they can bring in outside consultants to say you shouldn't unionize because it sucks for all these reasons.
In many countries, that's not allowed, but in the U.S., because of just how bad our labor laws are, they're allowed to basically, as you said, just bring in outside people to do it, and sometimes bring in like undercover workers to break out the union.
How do you fellow kids? Unions suck, doesn't it?
By bringing in outside people, is that just someone who comes around and tells people this is the bad parts of unions?
Yeah, or outright lying to them.
Or lying. Okay.
I think that's might be a point of contention amongst pro and anti-union people is they come in and tell them the downsides, kind of like people might come in to a school and tell them the downsides of like safe sex or vaccines, right?
Okay.
Like, okay, sure, you can say that there are legit downsides to vaccines, like some people have allergic reactions, but it's unlikely that someone would be motivated enough to take a paycheck to go tell kids about that, unless they're also lying to them about other bullshit, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I think people should be told the truth about things in general. Like if vaccines really are on net very positive, I think it's a great idea to tell people, yeah, there's some downsides, there's some small risk, but your life is a lot better than if people didn't take vaccines.
No, I agree, but I just think that if someone was motivated enough to like make it their job where they go around talking about the dangers of vaccines, they're going to do it. They're not going to be intellectually honest about the information they're delivering. I'm guessing is the...
Yeah.
I had one of the, what was it, like the abstinence only sex education at my school, and they did bring in speakers that talked about like that did present very skewed information, and I guess that was like their hobby horse or whatever. And then it was obviously like the school board and the parents' interests to discourage kids from having sex.
What was the skewed information they brought in? I'm just curious.
Just like talking up the horrors of STDs and how if you get pregnant it'll ruin your life. And
I think it seems like we have very much internalized those lessons regardless. Yeah. But we are getting off the topic. So if we don't join a union, is it okay for me to talk to my coworkers and be like, hey, let's not come into work this particular day until the boss agrees to give us some more money?
Yes, it's allowed, but unlike if you're in a union, you have no protection. Like in a union, if you do that, they can't fire you for going on strike, basically.
But if you are in a union, then they can make it illegal to talk to people about going on strike on certain days.
Yes,
if they're considered
essential
important
workers
for some reason. Yeah, or if it's a general strike or whatever. So I guess it comes with some protections, but also now the government gets to tell you what you can and can't not go to work for.
Yeah, that's very much like in the modern era of U.S. labor law. In a lot of other countries, that's not the case. They can't force you to go to work.
I guess the weird thing is it feels like I thought unions were there to empower me, that I could stand up to management with my other workers and represent ourselves as a group and be like, look, you either do this or all of us are walking. And instead, it sounds like unions are just signing on to another government and they get to make decisions for us, like how much we get to be paid and what we can and can't strike over. And it doesn't, I was always told that this is an empowering thing for myself. And it seems like it's just another government to sign up to. And
that's
hopefully there'll be a good...
Yeah. I mean, you do vote for the people who are in charge of your union and could recall them if you don't like them.
Yeah, so I think that it's, whereas you can't recall management, right?
Yeah, but
and
I mean,
if your union leader is whatever shafting you, or if you feel like they are, you can get them kicked out and replace them. Whereas, like if your boss is shafting you, you just have to try and take it.
But no matter who the union leader is, you're now stuck under these laws that are written by the government telling you when you can and can't not work.
But you're helping it. Like, I think the main difference is that it puts the people drafting the laws, in this case, like if the union's like a little government, people drafting them and voting them on are you, not just like the dictatorship of the owner of the company.
No, but I think the main person drafting the laws is the actual federal government, right?
Yeah.
Like you have you got some wiggle room of what you can do, but the federal government is the one that says you can do this, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like it might be a complicating factor, because you can't really get around that it seems like if that's the case, and I'm not sure what the exact like federal laws are regarding unions, but like just because they've got some stupid case, whatever, if you're in the railroad, you have to keep working or whatever. Like, I guess, so you say, okay, I'd rather bite that bullet and get all these perks, like sick days, paternal leave, stuff like that. Family leave, whatever.
Yeah.
I think that's why we got Ferb here to tell us what the federal laws are.
Yeah. So I guess I'm just trying to respond to your incredulity. Is like, here's how I'm thinking about it. But yeah, sanity check us.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of how it is in the present day. Before the 1950s, what the unions would often do is they would go on strike to say, hey, this is the law we want the federal government to change. And then they made it illegal for unions to do that. So unions no longer had a voice in the federal government.
I think that's a good thing. I'm not sure I want small groups of people working in an industry to have a huge say in the federal government, right?
I want them to saying things about what it's like working in that industry, or what people working in that industry should be entitled to, or,
I mean, I think the people in the industry should be able to argue with their bosses about what they're entitled to. But if they're getting the federal government involved, then they're getting, the entire country and the force of weaponry involved.
It sounds like the federal government inserted itself into the union issue.
Yeah,
so
which sucks.
So it sucks, but like, as long as they did, then it's like, all right, fine. If you guys are going to get involved, then we have to get involved, as well, right? Like,
I guess I would prefer not to, because in that case, I can still meet with my fellow workers and just be like, hey, let's not go into work this day until the boss talks with us.
Well, the downside of that is before all these laws were in place, how unions and the companies would decide things is basically with guns. The union would have an army, the company would have an army, and they'd fight it out.
Well, that sounds absolutely terrible. I guess I can see why the government got involved. Why did they arm up and start shooting at each other?
They basically, for the same reasons now, of they want higher wages, they want less hours. But since there was no legal protection, their only protection was a gun.
All right, I'm very confused here. They want higher wages, so they go to their employer with guns and said, pay us more or we'll shoot you?
Yeah.
That sounds like robbery.
Is there an example that people might have heard of or be able to Google about this? Because I never heard about like a violent holdup of management. I could imagine Amazon warehouse workers, whatever, walking in all carrying and be like, all right, we're taking over. We want $10 more an hour. But I'd like to see how that would possibly shake out.
Didn't there used to be a lot of places where they would come in and seize the factories and say,
seize the means of production?
Yeah, you give us more money or we're taking all your machines from you?
Yeah. The biggest example I would say is the coal strikes of the 1910s, where basically it was just warfare for about 10 years with the unions on one side and the companies on another side.
I'm just speculating, knowing nothing about this, that they probably tried asking nicely first,
yes,
and then less nicely,
Yeah.
And then it's like they're probably told, get back to work, and slapped, and they're like, okay, cool, I'm going to bring my gun, and I'm going to get treated better.
Well, why don't you quit your job?
Maybe it's the only job in town. Maybe it's all you're qualified to do. Like, it's 1910, you can't like grab a car and move one state over,
And
Yeah,
very
you can.
often, all the companies were like this.
Okay.
So no matter where you went,
you
it's the
could
same.
walk to the next state. You could rent a carriage if you could afford one.
It's still
right?
That would be a significant upheaval of your life, though.
Yeah.
If you have a family, a house, or whatever, like.
Yeah, but like you don't have the power to like just get up and move out of the state like on your own, really.
I guess it would be hard, but like if you talk to your fellow union members and you're like, we're not going in the mine until they pay us better, then your employer is shit out of luck. They got to pay you better, right?
Well, what they would do is they would bring in other workers who aren't in a union, often called scabs, because if you're going on strike, you're striking at the heart of the company. Scabs, stop the bleeding. So scabs would come in and they would work, weakening the power of the union, and they still do that today.
So there's people who want these jobs and are willing to do them for less, but the union workers won't let them take the jobs?
They'll try to stop them, but I mean, nowadays they're not allowed to stop them from going in. But basically, yeah, it weakens the power of the union because they're working for a lot less with a lot less benefits. So it's harder to negotiate if someone's willing to do that job.
I mean, that makes total sense to me, but that also seems like it should be okay. Is there any reason I should take a job from someone else and demand I get paid more?
Well, the reason they were paid less actually than the union workers.
No, I know, but what the union workers are doing in effect is telling someone, you can't have this job, I want it, and I'm going to get paid more for it, right?
Yeah.
I think the idea is like you can always find somebody desperate enough to take a job for next to nothing, right? And like, yes, that's the case, and that's like
it's not sustainable though.
It's not sustainable though. That's I think the punchline. But I mean that's the case that people have against minimum wage requirements. It's like, look, I can find somebody who'll do this job for $3 an hour, and it's like, yeah, I suppose, but like, I'm not an economist. I don't know the whole chain of reasoning, but I don't think that just letting the people who will come in and do this for the least amount of money will, in aggregate, work out the best for everybody. Like, I think that's like the model of like whatever free libertarian capitalism is, that it will actually work out the best for everybody.
Yeah.
But I think they have a very contrived definition of best.
Okay. I mean, I could see how it works out worse for the employer because they're losing good skilled people, and maybe the people who work for less because they suck or are less productive or something,
or they're more desperate.
Yeah.
Like if you have a house with one other full-time housemate, if you had a place that had 6 other full-time housemates, you'd be paying 1/6 of what you need, or I guess whatever, 1/3 of what you pay now.
I mean, in that case, why don't you just move into a mansion and be like, look, I need to get paid 6 figures in order to support myself, so you have to pay me 6 figures at McDonald's.
Because at some point, reasonableness rears its ugly head. But I'm just saying, like, if you live in a shitty apartment, I guess I'm saying if you have next to no cost of living because your life is in a place that most people wouldn't want to live in,
right?
Like, well, I'll take anything I can take over abject poverty,
yeah.
Right? I don't know. I guess.
I mean, it seems like you're refusing those people the ability to have even a little job, and they have to be in abject poverty instead.
They can go. I mean, I suppose the union's counter argument is
join us.
Maybe it's like, yeah, join us.
Sure. Or, if they can convince them to join them, then sure.
Or fuck them, because like there's 30 of us. There's less of you that
right.
So like it's
fuck the poor people. We can kill them if we need to, right?
I mean, that's also the management's position, but
the management likes the poor people. They're working for them.
But I think it's where's my third thought going with this?
It just seems like it's an anti-poor person thing, that if you want to work for less, fuck you, you can't have jobs.
Well, ideally, they'd want them all to join the union and get paid more, but in modern times, it's not really the case with just how bad labor law is nowadays.
I mean, if you can convince them to join the union, then that's great, but maybe if convincing them to join the union means they can't have a job, then I don't know why they would join the union, right?
Maybe the argument would be like, look, there's lots of $3 an hour jobs. Go find another one because we're trying to negotiate our business over here. And like, I get it. Like, that's not necessarily fair to that person. But if they're willing to work for $3 an hour in this hypothetical, they can probably find someone else that'll pay them to do something for $3 an hour.
It's not like the union owns the job. You can't be like, this is my job, go get a different one somewhere else.
I think the union is trying to make it basically like that, so that they own the jobs.
That's really fucked up. I don't think that should be legal.
Well,
I think it has.
Isn't the person paying the employee the one who owns the job?
Maybe
Oh, sorry, Ferb, we're talking over you. Go ahead.
I'd have to look at the specific name for it, but basically, right to work, that's what it's called. In right to work states, the unions don't own a job, but in non-right to work states, they basically own a job and could say anyone who works here must join our union.
Well, that sounds pretty fucked up. Am I wrong in thinking that?
I guess it would depend on the union, and you as the employee get to pick where you want to work. So if one union has shit requirements, the other one doesn't. You're just on the job market. You get to make whatever trade-offs everyone else makes, right?
Yeah, and also you could join a different union.
Is that the case for every job in every because we're all in Colorado, a right to work state, where your employer can say, I'm firing you because, well, actually they can't cite like a specific reason like your hair color, but
it's
like,
at will employment.
it's at will. It's like, all right, yeah, we're not we don't want you to work here anymore. Sorry, tough shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Maybe
also,
it's because you're a Nazi
right
and
to work
we have a lot of Jews in our workplace. Sorry, say that again?
I'm also in a right to work state. Ohio famously is very right wing.
Okay.
And so you're saying that states that aren't right to work, is it every job that has unions, or is it just like a lot of them? Because I imagine there's McDonald's in every state. I don't know if any of them have unioned employees.
Right
But they
now,
might. I have no idea.
there's only one fast food company and only one fast food location in America that's unionized. And if you're not including Starbucks, which in the last year just unionized a whole bunch. I think it's some
I'm just-
Burgerville or something that's the only unionized fast food company.
I'm not sure if I'm looking at this the wrong way, but I've known, because I come from an immigrant family and a lot of people that try to work for themselves and make their way. I knew a guy who started up a game store on his own, which was amazing for me because I was a total nerd gamer and I knew the owner and, we played at his store. But for a while, he got pretty big and he had a couple employees. And then eventually he went in with another partner. And anyways, there's a whole story behind it. But for a while, he had a couple employees because he couldn't man the store fucking 7 days a week, 16 hours a day. It wasn't quite 16, but it was more than 12 hours a day. And I'm just like trying to imagine from his point of view, if his employees came up and said, by the way, these aren't your jobs where you can hire people to work for anymore. These are now our jobs. You have to employ us. You have to pay us. And this is what you have to pay us. And if you don't like it, tough shit. No one else can work here. Like, that seems incredibly fucked up to me, especially since I knew him as he was starting this store from nothing and digging into his personal savings and living off ramen so that he could finance it. Like, how is it
I don't think
okay?
I don't think anybody would unionize against this guy.
I mean, I've literally heard stories in the past month where people have done that, but I think that may be an extreme situation right now, and that's not normally likely, but it's basically the same thing, right?
Well,
I understand.
you would negotiate with like the union would negotiate with the company of this is what we'll pay, etc. Basically, like what benefits you're going to give us, and they decide together what they will be paid and what the rules for employment are, and the employer could just find new workers, or they could agree to the union's demands, or the union could change demands.
And that's basically how it happened because, I mean, there was no union, but it was one guy and two people he knew. And so they talked things out and figured it out. But if a union was involved, he literally would not be able to say, no, that's not a good deal. I'll go see if someone else can fill a position, right? He would have to keep paying them and employing them.
Well, he could find other workers who aren't in a union.
But if the law was that if there's a union in a workplace, you have to join the union to work there, then he couldn't do that.
Yeah, that's correct.
Well, hold on. How does the union of two employees force the no? I'm like, for real though. How do they force the company into a union? Doesn't the company have to like at some point consent to having unionized employees?
No, I don't think so. I think Levi, please correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it just like a vote, and if it passes, then the federal government now has the guns on their side?
Yes.
And I mean, I know this is a silly toy example with just two employees, but I don't see how it's in principle different from a large company with several hundred employees.
Well, I do wonder if it was as easy as getting two employees to take over a company. I would think that people would be doing that all the time. Well,
again, the thing that I heard most recently was a example where that happened, and then the shop immediately closed down.
Right.
Because the employer was like, well, I can't do business anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
We're thinking of Mina's world, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But I don't know if that's a typical example.
It's probably not, no.
I see it as being much different. I mean, what ends up happening is you gather all of the power at the top of a company.
Yeah.
And you could make a business and say, hey, here's my business and I want to hire workers who will work, like 12-hour days, no breaks, and you get paid $3 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And again, like that's an extreme example or whatever, but like you're like the biggest industry in the town and people are desperate enough. Like that's just.
I was going to say there's some unions that like span the entire country, so they can just collectively decide what everyone's going to be paid nationwide. The big one I know of, there's two big ones: the Auto Workers Union, and then I would collectively say like all the Hollywood unions because they're very weird. All the companies have a union. All the workers have a union. It's weird.
That's the example I knew of was the Writers Guild, where I think it was in 2007 or 9 or something.
Yeah, around.
Yeah, where remember TV sucked for a year because every writer went on strike.
See, I thought TV was great because people started doing things that they didn't get paid for just as passion projects, and it was really cheap because no one had money, but it was weird and esoteric and fun. That was where Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog came from, and that was good shit.
Like
But that was protest art. I mean, you shouldn't create conditions that make people want to protest so you can have good protest art. That's kind of nuts.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, the Writers Guild and like all those ones in Hollywood are very weird because they basically have 5 major unions there. One for the writers, one for actors, one for the people behind the stage and all that. And what they do is all 5 unions together organize, and then all the companies like Netflix, Disney, I'm trying to think of what else there is. They form their own union.
Just those.
And then basically there's just 2 union organizations, the company owners and the workers, and they just come together as an entire industry and say, this is what all of Hollywood and all of America is going to do for media industry.
Jesus.
Now that's, yeah, like, I mean, it seems like
It's weird. I kind of get your point, Jace, because...
Well, no, what I was going to say is it seems like that there's potential for exploitation on both sides.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, so, you know, the big corporation can be the only game in town and treat their workers like crap, but then the unions can get really big and bully all the employers.
Yeah. Like if
it's their own little government. And also, you know, which I kind of like, I'm still on their side because it's still small people versus the big guy. But then when it gets problematic, I think, is when everywhere is unionized, and then you have to, like, basically, it's like if you want a job, you have to join a union and pay union dues and do what the union wants, whether you agree with it or not.
Yeah.
With the really big unions, they start to get a little more corrupt because the higher up you go in the union organization, the less connected you are with the workers, and you're just focused on your own political career, basically.
That's hilarious because they've become the enemy that they were fighting originally.
Right. You were supposed to bring balance to the force.
Like the famous one is the former president of the Teamsters Union was basically what was his name?
Jimmy Hoffa.
Yeah, everyone knows who Jimmy Hoffa is and how corrupt he was.
Yeah. Basically organized crime boss.
Yeah.
It's
there's kind of a fine line between a union and organized crime.
Yeah.
There's a fine line between any organization and organized crime, right?
That's true. I kind of see your point, because if there's just one corporation somewhere and it's making X profit, it can drive down all the wages and force people into poverty and take much more profit from them. And I think in the long term it wouldn't work out because the people would leave. They wouldn't have workers. If new workers
it's hard for people to leave.
It is, but
especially if you live in a country or you're like, you know.
No, I agree. But over the course of decades, people would leave. People would be miserable. Probably more new people wouldn't show up, or if they would, just be temporary.
It's like.
But I can see how, like, in the end, this is bad for the company too, because they're running their shit into the ground by not paying a decent wage. But in the meantime, they've destroyed their company. They've destroyed this city. Or this town. I can totally see the people that live there being like, you know what, fuck this, taking up arms and seizing the place, because
but I mean,
we don't want our village destroyed. We don't want to be scattered to all the other cities. This is our home, and you're going to pay us more, or we're going to kill you.
Do you think a lot of CEOs are concerned with, like, well, maybe, I don't know, this is my own negative view of power structures, but, like, I think a lot of people are focused on short-term gains, and they don't care about driving the company into the ground. They want to become a millionaire.
Both. And that would, I agree, and I think that would be one of the reasons that people would take up arms and say no, just no. And if the company does go bust, well, because they can't afford to work under those margins, well, the city was going to go to the winds anyway, right?
I think that happens.
I mean, honestly, it just seems like another power struggle to me, and that's okay, I guess. There's power struggles everywhere, but it's no longer the romantic small employee versus big boss. It's more just like, here's politics and here's power, and this is what we got to navigate.
But isn't that what everything breaks down to?
I guess.
I still find myself confused that why don't we hear of more and more cases of Bill's Game Shop being taken over by the 2 employees that work there?
I think because most people are nice. They don't want to do that.
idiots kept saying, I don't why people wouldn't take up arms, and I'm like, actually, like it takes a lot to get people to take up arms, especially if you're already in poverty and you have a family and you don't have weapons.
We don't have to. It doesn't have to be arms. If all it took was like me and Jeff, the other guy who worked there, to be like, hey, why don't we tell the boss we're unionizing? We want twice as much money,
It's an
and we'll
extremely
get that
risky move,
for the month
though.
that it takes
Yeah.
for them to go out of business. We'll make money. Why isn't that happening every week?
Usually it's because they know the boss. Like the guy who owned the game store knew his
Or
workers.
because they know that the boss will say, hell no, you're fired.
It was going to
Well,
say,
yeah,
a lot of cases, since they can't fire you for joining a union, they'll make something up, which all companies do anyway. Of
Right.
why they
Like
fire.
we're downsizing.
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't hear. What did you say they'd do?
They just make up an excuse for why they fired you, and
Oh,
for instead of saying you tried to join a union.
Okay, that resolves my confusion. I thought you were saying that like if they successfully unionized, then they are essentially bulletproof. But you're right; they can say, "Look, we're just downsizing. I don't want to be open 7 days a week anymore. I can handle this myself. I'm going to be open from 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. I don't need employees anymore."
Yeah.
That's a perfectly legit reason. You can't prove I'm not going to do that. He might even do it for a week. You know?
Well, you'd probably have to do it for more than a week, or you'd get a lawsuit,
Yeah.
and it's going to suck for a while. But yeah, that'd be one way of handling it.
Okay. All right.
And
That
Yeah.
helps.
what also
resolve my
happens,
confusion.
like you're seeing right now with Starbucks, is they'll just say, "Hey, we're closing that location now."
Yeah,
Yeah. This
honestly, that's
this shop's not
probably
making
what I
enough
would
money.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd be like, I'm sorry, I can't do this profitably anymore, and it's not worth all the ulcers and sleepless nights it's going to cause me.
But there are a lot of pros to unionization too, right? Like I like the idea that I mean
I like the idea that they can make workplaces that were dangerous not dangerous. That's huge.
yeah, there's obvious benefits of like enforcing, safety, higher like living wages, better working conditions.
making management pay for like work imposed costs.
Yeah.
I hate the
Like-
term living wages because we have proof that people can live on $1 a day or less because hundreds
like-
of millions of people do.
Reasonable
United
quality
States.
of life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't say that part. You just said living wage.
Reasonable living wage. Very well. But yeah, I mean like so say like I think this might still be the case. I know that there's a money transport company that like, they stock ATMs and bank branches. And I think that they don't pay for bulletproof vests for their employees.
Oh,
And it's
I've
like
heard of that.
$16 an hour as it was a few years ago.
It's that
bulletproof
case in a lot of companies.
expensive. They what?
Is it that case in a lot of companies where you just had to buy your own clothing for the company?
Sometimes I know that McDonald's gives you a uniform, but like a bulletproof vest isn't like a t-shirt. It's expensive, and if you're making shit money, you can't even afford it. So it's like, all right, I need this job because yes, it pays $1 more than another job, but I've got to be prepared to defend this van full of money in a firefight, and they won't even give me a bulletproof vest. I can kind of see the perk of unionizing to say, look, I'm not going to spend my own fucking money to do the job.
Also,
Right?
$60 an hour is kind of crappy for.
That's what it used to be. I'm thinking, or I'm pretty sure
It might still be. I
in
mean,
2014 that this was the company I was looking at. So
so basically this job is just driving a truck and moving bags from one location to another, right?
and stocking the ATMs. That's when I would rob it. I think when the
driving
truck was
around with
open.
tons of
Yeah,
money,
but it's
Yeah.
it's extremely low skill. Like literally anyone could
but
do
extremely
it.
dangerous.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're
it's
getting
not low
paid-
skill if you're expecting to be robbed at any moment.
No. I'm saying basically a chimp could do this, but the problem is that it's dangerous, and that's why you're getting paid the money. But I can see because a bulletproof vest. I remember my brother bought one, and I was like, they weren't that expensive as he could afford one. And I looked it up. Yeah, it's $300 for a bulletproof vest. If someone saved up $300 so that they could move from a $10 an hour job to a $16 an hour job, great, maybe.
That's less expensive than I thought they were.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It depends on the quality too. I mean, I wouldn't want to get like a one off eBay at random and be like, I'm protected.
Yeah, it
But-
sounds even if we assume like a good one is a little less than twice that. You're still looking at like a full week's worth of wages.
A modular special operations vest is $700.
All right.
Shrug. I
Yeah,
feel like we should be asking Gray about this. I
Yeah,
know
right.
he's actually in the market for one.
Yeah.
but in any case, I do see that there could be benefits of. Well, you don't have to take the job working for the money transport company. You work somewhere else.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the case for everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons I think unions are almost, I don't know. I guess it's probably coming off in the episode that I don't
Well,
understand
we wanted to talk
what
about
makes
the-
unions good in the modern day anymore.
If you kind of look at minimum wage and a lot of wages in the company or in the country, they're not really growing that much. And in the past, they kind of grew because people went on strike to raise their wages.
Is that a good thing? Is, I guess, my question, because ultimately those wages come from the rest of the world. The consumers end up paying more for the thing, right?
In some cases,
Except
yes.
in
In many cases, well, in the past, they would put in their contract, we want higher wages, and also we don't want the prices to change, so they don't blame us. So
so do they want just the business to go out of business then?
it would cut into their profits, yes.
I don't know. There's pretty big movement modern day for people to care about things like fair trade and like sustainability and whatnot.
And that's great
kind
for
of new.
Yeah, no, and that's great for rich people. All the people I know who buy those sorts of things have a lot of money and get paid a lot, but there's also poor people in the world who need to go to Walmart and buy things on the cheap.
Fort Collins doesn't have paper bags at checkout anymore in the stores.
How come?
Paper bags are bad for the environment.
Oh, okay.
So you get to pay a dime
Yeah,
for
we
every
have the bag price too.
Wait, did I say paper? I meant plastic.
Okay.
Yeah.
They don't have plastic bags anymore,
Okay.
and you get to pay a dime per paper bag.
That's nuts.
But you can bring your own bags that, of course, you buy with money and bring in.
Yeah.
But
So like at Aldi's, basically.
yeah, it was just funny because I was there visiting and I was feeling a bit car sick, so I was going to run into like a King Soopers and grab one just to like have in case I needed to be sick in it.
Mhm.
And they don't have paper. I couldn't even find a plastic bag. I guess I could have bought a box of Ziplocs, but I didn't think of doing that. But anyway, I bring that up because you mentioned like just nice, expensive stuff for sustainability.
Mhm.
That was just a bone I had to throw out there because I was.
It's not all for rich people. There are companies that have based their. I mean, thinking of the Yes To brand in particular.
What's that?
It's like Yes To, and then like they have Yes To tomatoes or Yes To coconut or whatever.
But
They sell, like Bath and Body product things. But it was like two guys from Australia that were, had a vision for the company they wanted to make, and they're like, we're going to make like high quality products with like sustainable wages, like biodegradable, et cetera, and keep them at like competitive prices. And I always buy their stuff when I see it because it's really good quality. And as a matter of fact, they're a great company. I mean, part of their vision for the company was like, when we get to a certain size, we're going to use like this portion of the money to launch, like community garden projects and other stuff. Like,
If you, I mean, my question is, if you buy a Yes To tomato, does it cost more than if you were to buy a different tomato?
nope. I mean, like it's like Bath and Body products, so it's like, imagine, I don't know, shampoo or whatever.
All right,
It's like the same price
the same price as the cheap shampoo I
it's
can
at
get?
the drugstore, and it's like,
Okay.
it's not literally the cheapest one you could get from like the dollar store, but I mean, if you wanted a reasonable shampoo, it's, I don't know, like $8 a bottle or something, which would be like the same as Suave or whatever. I don't know.
Okay.
So can we take a minute and steelman the case for unions? Because I feel like either, like Enosh said at the top, and I was just half an hour behind him, like I've been disillusioned my entire life, or I'm missing part of the story. So
Steelman unions
Yeah, what's good about unions?
what's the pro-union argument?
gives the workers any kind of power.
Yeah. Effectively, it makes it easier to negotiate with a company if you're doing it collectively instead of individually.
Is there any reason that someone who's not in that union should support that union? Because it sounds like it definitely enriches the people in the union, but
It seems like it also normalizes, and yeah, Levi should answer this, but like my, unexpert opinion would be that unions could like force employers to behave kind of across the board.
Yes,
I think
if they were big enough. Or another thing that's made illegal is unions aren't allowed to help people who aren't in their union anymore.
they aren't allowed to help people who aren't in the
Oh,
union?
that used to be a thing they did, though, right?
Yeah, basically what they would do is they'd say, like, if you're a supplier, you'd say, we're not going to give them any more of our supply until they pay their workers better.
Oh, and now they can't do that.
It was one of the things, like, if you look up Taft-Hartley, it made a ton of things illegal for unions. And for a little bit, you basically had to say, I'm not a communist to join a union.
So
It's a little too collective.
So the truckers union, if the head of like the Walmart union contacted the head of the truckers union and said, hey, tell all your truckers to go on strike unless Walmart starts paying us more, that used to be legal.
Yes, and actually, it's interesting you point that out because that actually happened where the truckers union, I believe I can't remember the name of the city, it's somewhere out west, they basically shut down the city and said, we want everyone's wages to be better, we want this and that, and they shut down the entire city.
Is there any reason they couldn't use that power to say we want all the wages of white men to be better?
If it was just a like white only union, but very often unions today that are multiracial. In the
Are you
past,
coming around to the unions now, Inyash?
Well, no, I'm starting to see why the union power was curtailed, because if unions can just say, well, all the Italians in town, they should get paid a lot more, and if you don't pay the Italians a lot more, then we're not going to ship anything to your city. That would be I would understand why the government started cracking down on them.
I could also see why they'd crack down, because at the beginning we mentioned how you can't use your union powers for political purposes, and that makes sense. Part of my intuition is like, fuck you, we should be allowed to do whatever we want. And if we all want to protest the Vietnam War, like we're going to, but I can kind of get the case against that, just because it's like, look, you need to be using this for work stuff.
Yeah,
and that said, I don't know how you make somebody go to work, like we talked about. That's still a weird issue. But if it was just for every political thing, you hate the outcome of the election, so you shut down the city.
Right.
And so we want the other guy to win the election. It's like, well, we're not doing that. But now you've hamstrung the entire city because we need trucks to move goods back and forth.
Yeah.
So I get the reasoning for that.
Yeah, and I think that's why you couldn't have like the white men's union or whatever.
I mean, in the past you could.
Yeah, but not anymore. That's for the same reason you would say, okay, but if you're going to be in a union, it has to be for work stuff. And if you're going to be in a union, it has to be egalitarian.
Can unions discriminate based on race, gender, religion, that kind of stuff?
They do on gender very often, where you might have a women's union to argue for women's rights, like abortion, or
like equal pay for same work kind of thing.
But very often now, because everyone gets paid the same anyway, it's they've all kind of morphed together.
Okay.
I could see that being a thing, especially historically, whatever a racial minority group gets paid less. Like, all right, well, we're all going to unionize, so that we get paid at least as much as they are. Yeah. I could see that case being made.
So if I'm not in a union and the union is denying me jobs and it is raising the prices on things because the wages are more, and they could potentially shut down a city if they don't like the results of an election, why should I support a union that I am not part of? Because it seems like for the non-union member, there's very little upside here.
Well, when they had political power like that, the biggest example I always go to is FDR. In a lot of cases, the reason he did his New Deal policies is there was a massive strike wave pushing for those policies. Well, they were pushing for a lot more, and he negotiated down to the New Deal, so that could help out everyone in the country.
Okay. I know some people who would argue that the New Deal was a good deal, but
yeah.
But that's beyond the scope of this podcast. Huh. Is it? I just wanted to make sure. Is it still legal for a union to go in and seize multi-million-dollar buildings and equipment and just say this is ours now?
Not in that direct line, but what they've often done in recent times is they go on strike, make a company go out of business, and then they buy up that business.
Okay, that's fucked up. But can they? I mean, how? If they go on strike, how is it that other people can't get hired instead to do their jobs? Are they just that skilled?
Yeah, it's
that there are no replacements.
Yeah. It's in very skilled industries they could kind of pull that off. Like if you did it from McDonald's, it won't work.
But there's no longer a case where people can just go in and shut down machinery and say you can't use this anymore.
That's correct.
Okay, well, at least there's that.
I think that makes sense because it's not your machinery. Right?
Well, I mean,
it belongs to the company.
Again, I think, like he was saying, in the early 1900s, late 1800s, people would literally go in and shut down the machinery, and then that's when the police came in to run those people out, and then they fought back with guns, and then that's where the shooting wars happened.
Yeah, no, I think that's why I wanted to kind of bifurcate at the beginning of the conversation between historically how weird it was versus what unions look like today.
Yeah, but nowadays I guess they can't take over factories, so that's
at least something. Sit-in strikes where they're on strike, but they're just sitting at their job.
So they can take over factories.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird how that operates. I mean, they could technically have the police pull you out, but you know how police are. They don't want them to damage the equipment in a company. So, yeah, they basically can't kind of take over the company.
Could they hire personal security to remove them from the premises?
Yes, they could.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point you're kind of trespassing, maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
absolutely.
Yeah, I don't know. So I'm just trying to think, like, I don't want to hypothetically use my own job because I don't want my, the hypothetical universe where my employers think I'm trying to unionize. But, like, let's say you're at a job with 10 people and it's a skilled labor job, or whatever, 10 people doing the skilled labor part, then the execs at the top or whatever. What are the cases for and against me, or not me, 10 other people? Like
Hypothetical, Stephen.
right? Because I'm not going to do this. I like the way my stuff is set just fine, and our culture is great, and my company is killing it. But I guess it's not clear to me. I don't know. I mean, if you're, I guess what I'm trying to think of as I talk through this, if it's a skilled labor job and like you don't like your company's current conditions, what's less work for you? To form a union, get all the union bylaws passed, get all the ducks in a row, and then negotiate better wage, or just get a different job. So like
Yeah.
it's probably just easier to get a different job for a lot of these maybe.
That's
if it's
kind of like where
local
we
or
are
something.
right now with how weak unions are. If they're a lot stronger, then they might be able to help you out with that. Like a big union might say, we're going to give you the resources to unionize your workplace and protect you if they do try to frighten you.
That makes sense.
I mean, but what is Stephen's motivation for joining a union? Or Jace, you work in a place right now with a lot of, it's very capital intensive, it sounds like.
Yeah,
So what would you
I would.
join a union if one came there?
I mean, it's interesting that we're having this conversation because I never had any experience with unions and don't know that much about them. But my parents were, and my dad in particular, really anti-union, and I was always confused. Well, like I kind of understand why. My parents both were self-employed, like business owners essentially, and they were competing with people who were unionized.
Okay.
But like,
Does that mean that they had big advantages because they weren't handicapped by a union?
yes and no. I mean, I'm trying to like go back to the original question though.
Well,
So-
from a company perspective, I can see the benefit of having a unionized workplace is you could say, hey, we pay our people better. Come to our company instead of their company.
Yeah, I mean, at my job, there's different levels of skilledness that like you have to. It's for that specific company too. It's a 203B compounding pharmacy, and a thing that people are worried about is that we recently like lost a bunch of employees, and now they're saying, okay, well, the people who do have like the ISO 5 clearance and like the knowledge to use these particular machines or certification to work with particular substances now have a lot more pressure on them to fill the role that was like, while they hire new people, but every new person that's hired has to go through all of the training and certifications. So
This is a great time for them to ask for more pay.
yeah, or complain that like some of my coworkers yesterday were saying like I was working yesterday because they give you extra if you come in on Saturday, and some of my coworkers just looked super exhausted. I was just like, man, why did you guys leave on Friday? And they were like, 3 a.m.
Oh my God.
Wait, you came in at noon and you left at 3 a.m. Like, yeah.
That's just enough time to sleep, shower, and get back to work.
Yeah.
At least they do pay overtime, but still, I mean, because I
So I mean,
feel bad for them.
but
They have legitimate complaints.
yeah, and also the company is kind of bent over a barrel right now. If they
Yeah,
were to
'cause,
leave, the company's fucked. So they should go to the boss right now and be like, "Hey, I know there's a tough time. We want a pay increase, and once we have some more people on board, we want
They should, but
less
everybody's so passive, and
Well-
they're not. Like the thing is, if they did make a union, I think it would benefit all of them.
They don't even need to make a union.
Or,
They
like,
can just go to
just,
the
like,
boss right
yeah.
now.
So I think if they didn't unionize and they went to the boss
Yeah.
and they said we want more money while times are in these trying times,
Yeah,
as everyone's
yeah.
been saying. Well, then when times aren't trying, they're the first ones to get fired.
Yeah.
Maybe
Right.
they have the most experience by far. And
But
if
the
they
second that you can find a way to replace the busybodies who want more extra money and aren't afraid to ask for it, then you do, right?
The squeaky
Maybe.
wheel gets the grease, but also gets the boot.
I mean, that's possible. I guess that is a thing for them to consider. Yeah.
I mean, if I was the mustache twirling capitalist, whatever,
Yeah.
that's exactly what I would do. I would kowtow to their demands to keep business running, and the second that I was able to, I'd kick them to the curb, right?
I think that would be a thing they should consider to, do we want more money? How badly? And how much can we ask for? Because if you ask for like triple your pay, maybe the boss will be like, okay, I guess. And then the second they can, they get rid of you. But if you want something more that is, doable, then they could keep you on and be happy for it.
Yeah, I can see that.
I mean, loyalty is also rewarded because you don't want to have to fucking retrain people constantly and be churning through employees.
It's nice when companies actually understand that.
Yeah.
Sometimes they don't.
That's
And
true.
It blows my mind.
Yeah.
They don't seem to realize that, getting somebody up to speed takes weeks or months, and that is a lot of lost productivity.
It's worth keeping good employees around. I've been in crappy work environments where everybody there is miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Levi.
Yeah.
You said unions are, or wait, okay, I had some questions. We were asking, what's Steven's incentive to join a union? I think we kind of answered that. What would you say is a company's incentives to have unionized workers? Why would you want that?
It makes it easier to compete with non-unionized places if you could say, hey, look at all the benefits we give to our workers. And they could say they did it out of kindness of their hearts or whatever, instead of the union forced us.
Wait, so isn't that a argument to not have unions because you can give them the benefits anyway and you don't have to sound like it was forced?
But they probably wouldn't, because if everyone's competing with one another and there's no unions, all the workers are competing to the bottom, basically.
Okay.
Anything else?
I know you want to talk about the railroad strike that may be happening in the near future.
Ooh, okay. Although,
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that is a good question. Can I just get a couple more things before we move on to the railroad strike?
Yeah,
I was still curious. I think we just keep moving on to other stuff and getting sidetracked. Is there a reason for someone who's not in a union to support a union?
Depending on how big the union is, they could make the wages for the entire industry rise. So that could be one potential benefit. If, going back to the Hollywood example, is if you're not in a union, the union workers are still going to say, hey, this is what the industry wages are going to be from now on, and they will get the benefit of that.
Okay. What about the rest of the public? I guess if you're in that industry, then having a union in the industry might be good. But if I am working in a completely different industry and they're getting paid more and the cost of things go up, that doesn't seem to be good for me personally.
Yeah, inflation's kind of tricky like that. You want the wages to increase so it counteracts inflation, but that's kind of hard to do. Some places have figured it out, some haven't.
Okay, the other big thing about unions is that every union thing that I've seen anyway, maybe there's somewhere this isn't the case, the pay is commensurate with seniority rather than performance or productivity, and it's incredibly hard to fire people. So people are incentivized to just stay there as long as possible and maybe not get fired, which is hard to do anyway, but not to be productive in any way. And this seems to ruin morale, I think, for the worker themselves, but just in general, it's bad for companies. A recent massive study showed that union workplaces have more product recalls, and I think that's entirely due to the fact that there's no way to get rid of bad employees, and there's not much incentive to have good quality product. And why?
Well, I'll address the first one.
Why have a union if they seem to make things worse? Sorry, go ahead.
I'll address the first one about seniority and all that. That was kind of invented in the 1980s to kind of break up unions, because if you have two people doing the same job getting paid different wages, you could kind of divide the union and make them fight amongst themselves. Mm-hmm. And then going back to the other point about people not getting fired, yes, that is a problem in some instances where they, notably police unions, where they just can't be fired for anything, or they can even say, hey, can I go back and get rid of some evidence real quick? But that's one of the things we do have to address is reasonable reasons to be fired, put in a contract, so they can't just be never fired.
Okay. You don't think it's good to have people who are more productive paid more than people who are less productive?
That doesn't happen now. That absolutely doesn't happen now.
I know, it doesn't. But unions make it even harder.
I suppose, but I mean...
it feels like unions codify it, whereas now you're right, it doesn't happen now.
My brother sent me a funny link a couple weeks ago. It's like a 3-minute YouTube video called the dick economy. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the dick sucking economy. I can't remember. But it summarizes this point perfectly.
Hmm.
You know, it's like if you ever worked at a whatever, especially like I guess a low skill job, low is that what the phrase we just used? My brain kind of just farted there.
Low skill jobs.
Yeah, like I don't know, you work at King Supers
Mhm.
and you're actually good at your job.
Mhm.
Or I was gonna get into the details. Anyway, you're faster, you're better at the job. You're getting paid the same as everyone else because you're all getting paid, as little as possible.
Yeah.
You are not incentivized to keep doing that.
Right.
And like, if you're doing so well that like, hey, can you go help this guy with his job? It's like, well, do I get paid more? No.
Yeah.
All right. Well, then I'm not gonna work. I'm gonna just slow down to the minimum speed to where you'll keep paying me.
Yeah.
That's a problem now.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I like the idea that like, I guess, and I suppose it's probably very union to union, like how they, as a collective, decide to allocate raises,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Like if it's if you have some actual measurable performance output, it could be on performance.
Mhm.
If it's it does make sense if you've been here longer, maybe you should get paid more, especially if you're better at your job.
The reason they don't do that, though, in a lot of cases is, like I said, they would divide the union if you start getting people paid different amounts. But if everyone's paid the same amount, it's kind of unifies them together to say, let's work together to raise all our wages.
So it's entirely a political power thing rather than a what's actually good for the people thing.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
What's good for all, not what's good for the individual.
I suppose if you worked at a company where everyone that you're trying to get into the union had wildly different pays, that would be something to consider, because if you're at the top, of course you don't want to join. But if you're like King Supers had that big strike last year, I don't think that there was a huge pay discrepancy between the people at the top and bottom of the income bracket involved in this strike. So I suspect that wasn't a concern for them, right?
I don't know anything about the King Supers.
Me either, actually.
Union.
Do you have a quick overview of that by chance off the top of your head, or
Remind me
should I
again,
just Google that?
who owns King Super, because I can't remember who it is. Kroger. I don't have the specifics, but I can link you to a story about it, because I didn't hear about it, although here was called the Kroger strike. So
Cool. Yeah, send us the link. Yeah, we'll put the link in the description notes for sure.
Last specific question for me before we get to the railroad thing. Police and teachers unions, good or bad? And if they're bad, why are they bad, but other unions are good?
Teachers ones are generally good. It depends on like each teachers union, honestly. There's actually one strike that happened a few years ago that was technically illegal, but it was so big they couldn't do anything about it. But police unions generally, I think what they should do is they should, let me just say this at the start, is government unions aren't allowed to strike at all. It was made illegal a long time ago.
Okay.
So, which is kind of why the teachers get in trouble whenever they strike, is legally they're not allowed to. But for police unions, what I would say is a better compromise is if all government workers in Denver were under one union instead of police specifically. Because if it's just the police, it turns into basically a police gang.
Well, I agree, but I think that's the case for all unions. Like, why is the police specific union bad when other unions are good?
Because they're supposed to, like, it kind of changes their interest of they want to protect themselves instead of protect the people.
I mean, again, I think that's the case of all unions. They want to protect their union members, and they don't care too much about people outside of it. That's why I lump teachers in there too, because teachers' unions are there for the teachers and not for the kids. And industrial unions are there for the people who are part of the union, and not for anyone else.
I think because of the role the police play, it's kind of a lot worse if they're acting in their own interest instead of people's interests. So that's why I'm kind of very against police unions, or if we do have them, it should just be a government-wide union.
So I agree that they have a lot more power and a lot more potential to abuse it, so that having a union that is only interested in protecting their own members is extra bad for the police. But in principle, if it's bad for the police, isn't it bad for any group to be like, we're only for our own people and fuck everybody else?
Well, generally, like in industry unions, the benefits kind of ripple out to other people who aren't in a union. Like I said, it might increase raises industry-wide. But with government and police unions, it doesn't ripple out. It doesn't help anyone. It kind of just helps themselves.
Okay.
And you said this, like, there was just something that caught my attention when you said that the teachers' unions were there for the teachers, not the kids.
Yeah.
Like, yes, that's true, but the teachers are there for the kids. And so, like, they're not there for the paycheck, you know. Like, they're not doing it for free. I understand, but like, I think most people understand that you don't get into teaching for the big bucks. You do it because you want to train kids for whatever reason people want to do that for. But like, I don't think it's as I can imagine someone saying, "Sure," and the police are there for the public, but that seems like a stretchier statement than teachers being there for the kids. Like,
I think that's the equivalent statement.
It takes the same amount of time to say, but I don't know if it's exact. I don't know if it's actually the same kind of statement.
I mean, it depends on your priors. Like, I think teachers have good intentions, but if they actually cared about the kids, they wouldn't work for public education. Usually, I hate to say that, but like, I have a very big chip on my shoulder about public education, and I think it's horrible.
But don't you have that about cops?
I think cops are the same way, where they are usually there for good intentions to try to protect the public, and if the system itself is failing, then that system is the problem. In a similar way for both teachers and cops is what I'm trying to get at.
Like, the teachers union could all go on strike until schools get less shitty.
Yeah.
I mean, what they did during COVID, they were like, you know what? We just don't want to work. And even though it was bad for the kids.
I don't know if it was that we don't want to work.
The what?
I said it wasn't bad for the kids.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of complicating factors to sending your kids to COVID factories to come home and cough on grandma, you know? Like,
right.
So I think not forcing kids to go to school there, I'm sure there are pros and cons. I didn't, you know, and the longitudinal data isn't available yet.
Actually, I saw a lot of data that kids caught up really quickly. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
Like,
I've anecdotally heard of cases where, like, that's not the case. So I'm curious to see how this will settle down. But I think that a good case was made. Like, no, let's not send kids to a place where we're pretty sure they're going to get a disease that we're pretty sure will, like, have a non-negligible chance of killing someone in the house. Like, but that's getting too far into the weeds. I guess I was just thinking, like,
I mean, honestly, I don't think kids should go back to school because I hate public schools, but I also don't think teachers should be getting paid because the school should be shut down.
But as long as the institution exists, and you're like, okay, I'm going to go in there and try to make schools a little less shitty with the power that I have one person can do, right?
That's what most cops want too.
I think that, at least, you know, there was a period where I wanted to be a cop, and I didn't want to go into it to, like, make the institution of policing better. I wanted to do it, you know, because I watched a lot of, like, Kenshin growing up, right?
Yeah,
like,
you wanted to protect people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that's different than, like, I'm going to be here to try and make the institution of public education or institution of policing better, right? Although I think I've definitely had teachers that were there to, like, basically fight the system. They're like, all right, the system gets in the way of us doing a good job, so we're going to do, like, the thing where you guys have to pass the test, but I'm also going to teach you guys stuff.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, basically.
I've had that before.
Those are heroes. Should we talk about this railroad strike? Because
we should.
I think
Although
Levi wanted to, and I kind of am interested.
I want to give Ferb a chance to say good things about, or Levi, sorry, a chance to say good things about unions if you want to, because I realize I've shat on them a lot, and, like, as my position as the guy with the microphone over here, that's kind of unfair. So if you want to go to the railroads, let's go to railroads. But if you want to say good things about unions and why they're helpful, I want to cede the floor to you for as long as you want it.
Well, I would just mention briefly before we go to that is government unions are so weird because, like I said, it's actually illegal for them to go on strike, so they have no power to do anything. So they're in a weird situation.
That is very strange. What power do they have?
Basically nothing. Like, the biggest example you can find of this is Ronald Reagan in the 1980s essentially fired like all the airport workers who went on strike.
The control tower guy specifically, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So then, all right. Do you have awesome things to talk about private unions then?
At the moment, they need to improve a lot because you have a lot of people who are basically in their seats for, like, a long time to keep getting reelected and not doing anything. In the last year or two, we kind of seen a lot of those people get tossed out and new people voted in, so things might be changing. Like, notably, the AFL-CIO has a new leader now, so that might... The AFL-CIO, by the way, is the American Federation of Labor, Congress of Industrial Organizing, and basically every union in America, Canada, and Mexico mostly are a part of this organization, and it's basically
Jesus.
a union government.
Yeah.
And what they do primarily is they try to get laws passed to benefit unions.
Hmm.
But they kind of haven't done anything for a long time, and their goals now are just so bad. They want to get 1 million new union workers in the next decade, but by the time that happens, job growth will have grown so much that they would have less people percentage-wise in unions.
Oh boy. So you mentioned a few times that labor laws in the U.S. suck right now and are really weak. What would you like to see the labor laws to be? What would you like unions to have the power to do?
Well, the first thing I would do is just get rid of, like I said, Taft-Hartley, which, like I said, gets rid of a whole bunch of things. It makes it so they can't strike for political causes. They can't help workers in other industries. They can't have general strikes.
So you want unions to be able to team up with other unions and have strikes over political issues?
Yeah, it would help out a lot.
How come? Like, what would that help?
Well, historically, like I said, the big one are like the New Deal policy that they kind of pushed forward, and then the 1910s they had some big strikes for increased working conditions, and that's all I'll say on that. And like right now, with everything going on politically, it would be nice if we have a party who actually has to listen to workers. Technically, the Democrats are like that, but they haven't listened to unions in a long time, and unions are 50-50 between the two parties.
I know this is a stereotype, but my mental picture of a union worker is like a trucker or a guy that works in the mine or something and wears a MAGA hat everywhere he goes. So they had that power. Are you not worried at all that they would use that power to go on a general strike and to shut down the country unless it's agreed that Donald Trump was robbed and he should be the president right now?
Well, I mentioned it briefly. If you look at like how people who are in unions vote right now, it's split 50-50 between the two parties. So it won't do much good either way. And it would be very hard to get unions to go on strike for that right now. But not as like thinking of politicians, but thinking of policies, they might go on strike for higher minimum wage, workers' protections, women's protection, and all that because it benefits those people at work.
So you don't think they would ever go on strike for a political purpose, like, I don't know, abortion should be made illegal after 12 weeks or something?
It depends. Well, I mean, because a lot of women are in unions, they might not do that.
I mean, I'm sure it's maybe that particular case is unlikely, but you think it should be okay for them to call nationwide strikes for laws that don't necessarily have anything to do with work?
Yeah. I mean, it all benefits them directly. And because of union workers are from all stripes of society, it does kind of make it so it has to benefit all of society, usually.
Okay.
Yeah, don't unions generally have rules where, I think we already talked about this actually, but, it has to be for work things.
I asked him what he would like to see ideally, and he said that he would like to see a repeal of that sort of thing. I see the statistic that says less than 11% of people in the U.S. are in unions. So if they could shut down the government, the country, wouldn't that basically be ruled by 11% of the people?
Well, I would want unions to be a lot bigger, and I'd say that statistic. I think it's even lower now. It's probably 10%, but about 6% of that is just people in the government, and 4% like about people in just private industry.
Oh wow! So 4% of the people would shut down the nation if they wanted to. Okay. Sorry. So you want them to have more ability to strike about whatever, and this is because it will make working conditions and pay better for everyone in the U.S. is the hypothesis.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to get the railroad strike?
Yeah. I wanted the railroad strike before, or here in a minute too. But I guess I share Inash's concern because obviously I would like it if my side did that, but I always get worried whenever someone proposes an idea for like a really cool weapon we can use against the enemy, and the enemy really sucks because the weapons never go away, right? Mm-hmm. Like the one example would be, let's say Biden was to decide that he was going to do whatever he could to make the Supreme Court 15 people instead of just 9, right?
Mhm.
And then stack it full of 6 people that he liked, and then tip it blue. Well, if like the precedent is set that the president can expand the Supreme Court, then next term we'll have 50, right? And so I think that I guess I worry that yes, like the idea that you could protest bad things. I would like that when they're doing it for things I like, and I would hate it when they're doing it for things I don't like.
Right.
And since I don't get to pick, I think it's dangerous to have that weapon available.
Well, it depends like how many people you would need to do, because of like how big our country is now. You would need a lot of people to go on strike to affect things.
Yeah,
that's true.
And actually, I'll give you a link. How I say like general strikes are illegal. There was actually one about 10 years ago. It was the last one that happened in the U.S. during Occupy Wall Street, and it's kind of interesting because they weren't union workers who did it. Non-union workers forced union workers to go on strike. It's very weird.
Isn't this what you guys are supposed to be doing? Do your job.
Do your job and stop doing your job.
Yeah. Well, you said the AFL-CIO just had new leadership voted in. What would you like them to do?
Well, they need to get a lot more people into unions. Like I said, their goals are just basically nothing. And on top of that, they need to start fighting for a lot more worker protection so they could do a lot more things.
Okay. All right. Well, was there anything else you wanted to hit on, or should we move into the railroad thing?
That was it for me.
All right. Let's talk about railroads. What's going on? Why is the entire railroad industry threatening to strike?
Well, what it is a new policy was rolled out where they're kind of like flex workers where their schedules are not set. And one of the new policies they put in this is basically they could be called in at any time. So they only get about 1 day off a month.
Ugh.
And they've been trying to fight this for the last 2 years. And the reason is kind of getting to the point where they're going to strike now is basically the way the law is written is they have to go through the entire federal government. They have to go through the judges. They have to go through more judges, then to the president now, and then to Congress. And Congress could ultimately say, you're not allowed to strike. Everyone else is kind of like, they could suggest they don't strike, but Congress is the one who could say, we're not going to let you strike.
And they probably will, right?
It looks like they're going to try. I mean, like I said, they've been fighting for this for 2 years now. And
no, I mean, Congress probably will say that they can't strike, right?
Yeah. And I'm not sure if the workers will listen to that or if they won't. So
yeah, that'll be interesting to see. I mean, like, I'm definitely on their side here. That sounds terrible. Just
what happens if the Congress says you're not allowed to strike and they strike anyway?
Historically, they call in the National Guard to. Yeah. What's crazy
men
about that is
up at their house and take them to work.
What's crazy about it is back then that was legal for them to go on strike, but they called in the National Guard anyway and said, you've got to go back to work.
Huh.
I don't know about you, but I don't want my trains or like any other essential infrastructure being managed by people who are doing the job at gunpoint.
Right.
Like because the guy pointing the gun at you doesn't know if you're doing your job correctly.
Sounds like a great recipe for derailments.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like right now, actually, Britain is going through a major railroad strike as well. But what they've compromised on there is for like essential goods, they're still going to transport it, but not for anything else. So like medicine and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, my industry won't be affected. I probably will.
In the U.S., I don't think they're going to do that. I think it's just going to be a total no trains will move, and they might just have either they call the National Guard in and force them to do it, or they just say, "Hey, National Guard, you're going to start driving trains from now on until the strike's over," which they've done before.
Huh? But the people who aren't in the union are free to not come to work, and the National Guard won't show up at their door.
Yeah.
That's so weird.
Yeah, so that's going to kind of affect everything.
So the people who are upset are the flex workers because they don't get enough days off, right?
Yeah.
And the companies could, in theory, fix this by paying them more or hiring more flex workers or something, right?
Yeah.
Why don't they do that?
Because then they'd have to pay more.
Yeah, that's exactly why. Is they want to make more money.
Why don't the flex workers quit unless they get paid more?
Because this gambit might pay off.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And I mean, I know a guy who works in the railroad industry for several years, and depending on the job, it's not very transferable.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it pays pretty good.
Okay.
Because it's a high like value to the infrastructure job. Which
Yeah.
just meta note, isn't it weird that like so much of our infrastructure depends on technology that hasn't changed in 200 years?
Right.
But the maybe more than 200. No, wait, less. Who cares? So yeah, I guess like if you're a rail station operator or a person who lays down tracks or whatever, that doesn't lend itself to another kind of job, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, if I can fight to make the job I'm good at better, like I'm going to do that first, and then if not, then I'll take the life change and whatever #learn to code, like they tell everyone else to do whatever other job, right?
Right. It's so weird because I am absolutely on board with all the flex workers getting together and being like, hey, management, pay us more and hire, 10% more people within the next month or we all walk out. Like I think that's awesome. And that is powerful and empowering and they should do that. But like, I'm not on board with the government saying, hey, we get to decide if you're allowed to approach management or not and demand things. And also, I'm not great with the government telling employers, hey, you have to keep paying people and employing them and you can't hire other people to replace them. The whole thing is like really weird. I don't like the whole massive powers getting involved and sticking their hands in this shit. But I guess...
So I was just looking at an article about the railroad strike and seeing some other things. It looks like some of the ports right now are also going on strike. So if these happen at the same time, our entire distribution network kind of goes offline for a little bit.
No.
Bring in the drones.
What are the ports going on strike for?
Well, it's the ports and the trucking industry.
Now we just need the planes,
Yeah.
I guess. And then we can't ship anything anywhere at all.
They're going on strike to have a union.
Oh, okay.
Which one? The ports or the trucks?
The trucks. Let's see.
I thought the trucks already had the Teamsters.
Well, a lot of the trucks, it's kind of weird. They're almost like their individual company, like an individual small business. So they're not part of a union.
You mean like FedEx, UPS, or
the big like 10 trucks?
McLean and
a lot of truckers are like technically work for themselves. They rent their truck. They have their contracts assigned by an outside agency and all that, but they're technically independent contractors, which is probably who's trying to form a union, I guess.
Yeah. Oh,
independent contractors are kind of weird because technically, but according to the government, they're not like workers. They're contractors. So they're in this weird place where they have none of the worker protections of the union and none of the worker protections of just workers in general. So they could just be fired at any time for like any reason whatsoever.
Well, you can't really be fired. You can be not rehired.
Yeah.
Or just they can tell you to stop doing your job.
Yeah. They'll be like, thanks, we don't need any more help with this particular situation.
Yeah, which is like being fired.
Yeah.
When you're the one being told stop coming to work.
Right.
Stop coming in, we're going to stop paying you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like this like strikes that's happening and the railroad strike that might happen is kind of going to affect the entire nation. And I'm not really sure what's going to happen. If it goes how it's historically gone, there's going to be violence all over the country. And
so wait, why would there be violence?
Well, like I said, the National Guard might try to force them to work, and other workers might take advantage of this and go on strike as well. And again, they might try to force them to work if it's needed for the country as a whole.
Okay.
So they're afraid that they might lose control of the country, basically.
Instead of forcing people to work, couldn't they hire other people to do this job?
Well, if it's like an entire city, then you'd have to bring an entire city worth of people in.
I mean, that would be extremely expensive, but it might be worth it. They had to bring an entire city of construction workers in to rebuild chunks of New Orleans after Katrina.
Yeah, that's true. I think the thing is, it's not going to just be one city. It's going to be multiple cities. So the amount of workers you would need to do that is going to be very hard to handle. So
hastily training an entire new workforce to do something that isn't that easy.
Oh, it's going to suck.
Yeah. And so I imagine the people who are going on strike aren't just going to sit back and let them import a whole,
I mean, if the people going on strike start attacking people who are trying to go to their jobs, I think that's
That would be shitty, but
Yeah, that's they shouldn't do that, and that's what police are for. Like, I don't want to be subjected to random violence. I'm just thinking, like, I know a bunch of people who do work that, it's okay, it's menial, but if all of a sudden someone was like, hey, come work at the railroad, yeah, it's shitty, but so is your current job, and we're going to pay you 3 times as much because it's an emergency, I think they'd go and take it real fast.
It generally, like, when you get into like general strikes like this, I mentioned it like in a Discord a while back, but kind of like the rules of the law go out the window, and it's basically just the rules of warfare come into play of who has the more power behind them.
Okay, so the unions are literally going to hold ground like an occupying force.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's basically the people versus the government is what's going to happen.
sounds terrifying.
It does. It sounds bad. So you think that Congress is going to say that they can't strike, and
They
the
might,
most likely course of action is they're going to try to strike anyway, and this is going to result?
yeah.
Well, shit.
Yeah, I'm not really sure.
When is this going down? I need to know when to stockpile food and water.
Yeah.
Well, right now they've got a month where they've got to talk to the president, and then I think they've got another month after that to kind of debate if they want to accept whatever the president's proposal is. And if they say no, then they go to Congress, and then it's another month. But someone pointed this out to me. At the time of when Congress, or when they would be going to Congress, Congress won't be in session, which means if they can't form a committee quick enough, they could just go on strike immediately.
All right. So we're thinking late September-ish?
Yeah, around that time.
Perfect. I'm trying to get a house that's still being developed, and they keep pushing back the date. Now it's like end of October. I think I can. Looks like we're looking at January now.
Oh my god!
If they shut down trucks and moving, well, I guess all the stuff's there. I think on site, so they don't need to move more things there via train or anything. Hopefully,
but if it's a general strike and the construction workers are part of a union, then they just might not show up.
Yeah, that'd be a drag.
My dad knows a bunch of people who do construction. Depending on how much money you have to throw at them.
The thing is, I doubt they'd let me just like bring someone else to finish this house.
That's true. The union would be outside with pipes and guns and stuff.
No, I don't mean like the workers. I mean that like the people who are building this complex.
Everybody will be too distracted to care.
I don't know if a bunch of people came in with trucks and like finished my house, and I move in, and like all the other ones are underdeveloped. I think Richmond Homes might notice. They'd be like, "Wait a minute, how are people living here?"
Oh, they might call you up and be like, "Steven, so people that need some work, eh?"
Suppose maybe.
I must admit, I have not been sold on unions by this. I still want Levi and Jace to present a case for me that I find more compelling, if that's possible. I'm sorry, I don't want to put too much pressure on you.
Or exclude me.
Or exclude, Steven. Yeah, I know you love unions too, right?
I did 2 hours ago. I mean, I still like the idea, like again, romantically the idea of, no, we're sick of you shafting us.
Yeah,
we actually do all the work. You don't. We want to get paid more. I like the principle.
Mm-hmm.
The literal and metaphorical seizing the means of production, like nicely dressed fat cats off site who collect all the money from all of our hard work. It's like, no, we're going to collect a little more of that money.
Mm-hmm.
I like that idea.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like it's hard to wiggle all this in. And if there's been a bunch of stupid, like, shoot yourself in the foot laws where the federal government has stepped in historically to like make things worse, like that's not really the fault of the ambition that workers are somewhat more in control of their destiny, right?
Yeah.
That just means that, government has gone in and done what governments do, right?
Well, they kind of favored like the big business over the workers. Like, I mean, back then it was the Rockefellers and the Gilded Age, where the government was basically beholden to companies completely.
I don't know very much about the government policies of that era.
Well, I just mean, like, if you're like whatever Rockefeller or whatever, and you own half the steel mills in the country, kind of you do have the government by the balls,
right?
So,
you're like the union. We're like, you know what? I can just shut down all my steel mills unless you pass this law.
So that's almost an argument more in favor of like more powerful unions. But I see how historically it worked out against unions because it got to be a dictatorship that said, I get to control, I'll shut down and I get to make the decision unilaterally. Rather than the government or rather than the employees doing it. But
yeah, I'm kind of like, he's put me on the side of pro union, and I feel like I am, but only because there's not something else or better. I'm not really like the hugest fan of either system.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. It's complicated.
Yeah. I guess Yeah, if you own like half the steel mills in the country, I guess the government just would show up and tell you don't shut them down, kind of like they show up at union owner members' places and say don't not go to work. And again, just devolves into power struggle again. Who's got the power and what can they do with it? Just the thing I don't like, but what are you going to do? I guess antitrust, make sure no one person has that much power.
Or automate everything and live in the,
I think automating
future.
Yeah.
That's one thing a lot of like these workers are afraid of, like especially the port workers, is automation, because the better conditions they get for their work, the less likely or the more likely it is that their job gets automated.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
like the more you ask for in money, the more it becomes attractive to get a machine to replace you, right?
Yeah. So in theory, like unions are kind of pushing automation to come even quicker, and how we're going to handle that as society is going to be interesting.
I hope we do a good job.
I mean, I think part of the worry is that right now, the ability to live is distributed to people based on how productive they are. And that's getting harder and harder to be productive as more and more things are automated. Maybe we should just do the thing where everything is made by robots and you're given the stuff to live regardless of whether you're productive or not, in some sort of universal basic distribution of things.
That's what I'm in favor of, but I feel like it's going to take us a while as a society to get to the point where we can wrap our heads around that. What? People deserve to live just for existing? Do people have inherent value?
It might be a while, or it might be a really loud, scary month. I imagine that the second that we, imagine if driving automation and whatever, insert two other high
employment numbers,
high employment, low skilled jobs get automated, and you've got like 15% more of America that like literally can't get a job. I feel like they're gonna make I feel like it would be pretty easy to make enough noise as they literally start robbing stores so that they can eat. Before they're like, it might be easier if we just like gave them enough money to buy food rather than had to deal with the daily lootings. Well, not lootings, but what do you call it? Thievings? What's looting when you need it?
I think it's still looting.
I think looting just has a negative connotation now.
Well, I mean, there's a difference between like, hey, look, the government's busy, I'm going to throw a brick through this Best Buy window and walk out with some TVs.
Mm-hmm.
That should be different than like, I'm going to steal this bread. But
we can call it Jean Valjeaning.
That works.
I've heard the most interesting speculation. It was a while ago now, but the reason UBI is getting big now is because intellectual workers' lives are being put at risk. Like menial labor, low skill labor has been being more and more replaced by automation for a long, long time, and no one said much about UBI. Well, I guess the communists did, but
I feel like people have said a lot about it.
It never went that far, but now that AI is starting to get big, and skilled intellectual laborers like accountants, for example, are in danger of having their livelihood replaced by automation within the next decade or two, all of a sudden everyone's like, hey, what about UBI? That would be great.
Google Copilot's going to take my job when they stop co-piloting and start piloting, right?
Right. Did you have more for us, Ferb? Because I realize we're actually creeping up on 2 hours now, which was longer than we intended.
No, I think that's it.
Well, this was a lot of fun. I enjoyed hearing about it. I always like situations where I thought I knew what I believed, and now I'm like less sure.
Yeah, kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I actually like that sensation rather than dislike it. So now I've got this uncertainty to look at and think about. So that's cool.
I am back again with Levi. He remembered that there were a couple other things he wanted to touch on after we were done recording, and so I have jumped back on with him a couple days later, and we're going to touch on some of those. Levi, welcome back.
Thank you.
So you wanted to talk about the AFL-CIO, I think, and the other large organization, which I now forget, and how they get kind of weird and deranged as they get big?
Yeah, especially the AFL-CIO. The other big one is the IWW, which kind of doesn't really after World War One, it was kind of basically destroyed. So it's still around, but it doesn't really have that much power anymore.
Oh, how did it get destroyed?
I can't remember the exact name of the laws, but basically there was 2 laws that said it's illegal to speak out against the war, it's illegal to speak out against the government, and they were
Oh,
yeah, and they used that as a justification to basically just arrest all their leaders.
damn. Okay.
They're still around though, and they're kind of like the second biggest organization, but not as powerful as they once were.
Okay.
Um,
What does it stand for?
International Workers of the World.
Okay. I can see how they might be worried about them being communists with that kind of a name
Yeah,
during the whole Red Scare.
I think that was the first Red Scare back then. Yeah, 1910s.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that one, but I know that the U.S. government has been worried about commies for quite a while.
At least since the 1800s.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oddly though, like Karl Marx actually wrote for like many American newspapers back then.
Yeah, I had always assumed that it wasn't a big worry until the Revolution of 1917, but I suppose if you saw the rumblings coming, you could have been scared quite a bit earlier.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the first. Well, technically, the first time they kind of had a Red Scare was like 20 years after the U.S. was created.
Oh, damn. Okay. Well, ever vigilant. What is it? Constant vigilance. That's right. All right. So what about these organizations? You think that they aren't doing as good a job as they should representing people?
Yeah, that's how I would put it. Like how they kind of formed. I'll do the AFL-CIO because the IWW is organized like completely differently. Is it's almost like a representative government is you elect someone from your union who then goes to your state AFL-CIO, and then someone from the state AFL-CIO gets elected to the federal one, and technically there's an international one as well.
That sounds absolutely just like a second government within the country.
Yeah, basically.
Wow.
Over time, they've kind of become very ineffective. Although even back then, generally, like unions, like the higher up you go, the more they are against people striking because they have friends in businesses because that's how you make kind of political relationships.
Oh, that is very interesting. Do you think that's corruption, or do you think that's people seeing that the other side of an issue and how it might not be as simple as it looks at first?
There's a little bit of both, I think. I was going to say one thing that kind of has kind of corrupted their organization is they kind of could set the rules of what you could do as a union, and if you don't follow their rules, you don't get their money for a strike and stuff.
Oh, so that's a huge carrot that they get to give, because all the union members are required to pay dues with every paycheck, right?
Yep.
And are they substantial, the union dues?
It depends on each contract. They vote on like what their dues are going to be per organization.
Is it, as little as an hour's worth of labor per paycheck, or can it be more than that, significantly more?
It could be more than that. I think a big one recently I saw was with the UAW is they just increased their strike fund, which kind of increased their dues as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like all the unions have like funds set aside for when you do go on strike, so you have money to pay the people.
And how much are the payments for while they're striking?
It's different per organization. I know the UAW just set it to $400 a week.
400. Okay,
yeah.
That's it's not great, but it helps a lot.
Yeah, I think before it was $270 something.
Okay,
and also they didn't pay you into the first week, which they also just changed.
It feels, it feels a lot like when the federal government tells states, you have to do these things, or we're going to take away all the money we give you for roads and medical and everything else, and that basically just means the federal government gets complete control over the things they want, because that's a lot of money.
Yep.
With the unions, like, you've paid in all this money, and then the only thing you get back out of it, well, I mean, I guess you get representation in the things, but the big carrot that you really need is being supported when you do go on strike, and they can just be like, no, you don't get that, because I don't know why would they not support a strike?
Well, one, if it's illegal, or otherwise, if they think they're gonna, like, we were talking about what was it, the coal miner one where they have to pay back all the money they from striking, like the first $2 million.
Yeah, tell me about that. What happened recently? The U.S. government ruled that was it the U.S. government ruled that the miners have to pay the company they were striking against?
Yeah, it's the National Labor Relations Board.
Okay.
Yeah, so they were on strike for well over a year, I believe.
Mhm.
And over that time, because they lost so much money, for some reason, the National Labor Relations Board has decided to sue them on behalf of the company to get the money back, which, if it
What?
becomes standardized, it kind of kills unions almost overnight.
Why can they do that? Was it an illegal strike or what's going on? Because normally you can't sue somebody for not working for you, was what I believed in the past.
Their justification, it's like the weakest justification I've seen is they harmed their revenue so much that they have to pay them back for that revenue, which is, I don't see as much of a justification, Ray.
I mean, no, it's not a justification at all. Anyone could say that I'm harming their revenue by not working for them. And I would tell them to fuck right off because I can work for who I want to work for. But it really solidifies in my mind that these aren't individual actors like workers and employers trying to negotiate. It's two distinct power groups, and the federal government is acting as a mediator between them and deciding who's right and who's wrong as sort of a judge, and then awarding damages or
Yeah.
or wages or whatever based on what it sees fit. And it feels so much the opposite of what I wanted, but I guess it's what I wanted out of a labor movement, but I guess it's just the way it works. So the federal government in this case decided that the strike was it illegal? Like, I mean, to be punished for striking, there had to have been something they did wrong, technically wrong, right?
Here, let me see if I can pull it up. They don't really give much of a reason for it.
That's bizarre. I'm assuming there's some kind of internal things we don't know about, because that's the first time I heard of that. Did the coal company like hire other people to take their place? They did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Kind of like one of the downsides of a strike is the longer you're on a strike, the weaker your ability to affect the company is, because they could just hire new people.
Yeah, as other people slowly get trained up and production goes back to what it was before, they just don't need you anymore.
And they were on strike for, like I said, over a year, I believe.
Yeah. At this point, I don't know if they'd be getting their jobs back. Maybe like the really highly skilled ones.
Yeah. I mean, let's see, it says 16 months, so yeah, at that point,
Mm-hmm.
they would have hired a whole new staff.
So what is the issue that you have with the AFL-CIO and how they're doing things?
Well, the big one I would have is, because like you have people elected from like lower levels, kind of like how we used to do with the Senate, it's really undemocratic the higher up you go, where they have like no connection to the people on the bottom anymore.
Okay, so I absolutely understand that's a problem, and it's always been a problem. But also in an organization that's that big, how could you possibly solve that? It seems like that's just always happens in any organization that's large enough. That's been one of my recent reasons for swinging much more towards federalism and just letting small municipalities have more power and federal governments have less power. But
yeah,
how can you?
Well, what the UAW recently did is they switched from having people elected from like lower levels slowly to just direct election for the people at the top from all the workers of the union.
Okay.
So the best comparison I could have is how most unions are organized is kind of like the electoral college, and they want to switch it to direct democracy.
Okay. And so every local union would pick like a guy or gal and send them directly up to the top position or positions.
Yeah. Well, they have elections, and they would vote for whoever they want to be, and the president. Well, it's called the president, so the presidential ticket, basically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you think that's going to help?
I think so. Like I said, in the last year, like the UAW has really turned around. For like a long time there, they were basically in the company's back pockets, just pretending to help the workers. But now they're trying to do a whole bunch of things that actually help them again.
Oh, like what?
Well, like I said, they increased their strike pay and made it so they actually get their money on the first day, and
Mm-hmm.
they're putting in some more protections that they actually have their big Congress right now, so they're changing a bunch of things.
Okay. All right. So overall, you think the large union organizations are doing a decent job?
I would say, yeah, I would say so. I was going to say that IWW is actually kind of organized completely differently. They're much more, as you said, like a federal organization of where there's a lot less power in the federal area and a lot more in the smaller organizations.
Oh, very cool. Does that reduce their ability to do large scale negotiations or impact the government, the U.S. government?
Well, in the past it didn't, but nowadays, yeah, like before they were broken up.
Yeah. Are there any major changes you'd like to see these big organizations implement?
Well, like I said, one is they really do need to switch to direct democracy at like those higher levels. And another one is at some point they do need to start advocating for some political action because things are slowly going backwards, like with workers' rights.
What other things are moving backwards for workers' rights?
Well, I mean, in the last 20 or 30 years, they've slowly been kind of undoing everything. Like you hear about pensions, you hear about, I mean, wages have increased in a long, long time.
Okay.
And a lot of that they come from striking to get more things, and they're so weak now that they can't really do that anymore.
So the idea is that the unions should get more money for their workers, both in terms of wages and in terms of employers' provided pensions?
Yeah.
The main way they would get that is by increasing the costs for the employers, which ultimately gets passed out to people who aren't in the union, right?
It depends. Sometimes they do freeze prices when they increase wages.
Right, but how does the employer, pay them if it doesn't? They don't get the money somehow.
I mean, a reasonable one would set it so they're still making a profit, but less of a profit.
Okay. I was about to ask, is there any reason that the union gets to decide how much profit someone else makes? But I guess it all just comes down to power politics again.
Yeah.
Okay.
But there actually is a different type of union that's starting to come back into action again, which is tenant unions.
Oh, what's that?
Basically, it's almost a reverse of a workers' union of people who rent rent their own homes form a union, and if they don't like rent being increased or the quality of the home, they go on the equivalent of a strike where they all say we're not going to pay rent anymore, and that kind of forces the landlord to at least come to the table.
And I'm assuming that they aren't worried about getting evicted for some reason?
Well, the hope would be, like, let's say you're in a building with, like, over 200 people. The landlord, if, like, they lost the rent from that amount of people, they can't find, like, 200 tenants in a month.
Yeah. That would be a very strong position, I guess, in many places. I'm in Denver right now, and the Denver market is absolutely freaking nuts. There is not enough housing being built, and the wait lists for people trying to rent things it's ridiculous. I really feel bad for anybody who doesn't already have housing in Denver looking for more, because it's not enough. Maybe 200, maybe a 200 units would be very hard to fill within a month, but also then you're thinking, well, they aren't paying rent anyway, so what?
Yeah.
Yeah, unless the requests were something, small and reasonable enough that it's worth it to do them.
Yeah, usually it's like some maintenance issue, or if they try to like increase rent a whole bunch. I just kind of wanted to bring that up as like a separate kind of union that's starting to come back into focus again. And there's one I was reading about a few months ago where basically they were trying to sell like an apartment or apartment complex, and so they all went on like I said, basically a strike, and then forced them to sell it to the tenants. So basically, it became like a kind of organization almost.
That's really cool. Did they sell it for the same price they were asking for? Or did they have to sell at a reduced rate?
I think they sold it at a reduced rate.
Oh man, okay.
Still millions of dollars though.
No, I understand. If I was trying to sell my car and someone stole my car and said you have to sell to me for $1,000 less than you wanted, I'd be a little upset at them.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that all the things? Was there anything more about the? Oh, you said that the some unions fight over territory.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the main issues, kind of holding unions back nowadays. Is everyone wants this? Or they're like, we want to be the union for this company, which kind of has like, if you're all competing with one another, then no one gets the company.
That's true, but then don't the employees get a better deal if they get to choose which union to join? They can get one that gives them better benefits and less union dues.
Uh, yeah, but it's kind of like a slower process than like what some are advocating now is just get a union as quickly as possible, and then if you want to switch it later on, you can.
Yeah, but switching is expensive and hard to do. Like, I'd be willing to wait an extra 4 or 5 months to pay less dues and get more benefits.
Well, I mean, like if you're at like somewhere like Amazon, you might not have that amount of time left, or they might fire you for trying to organize.
Okay.
Like the National Labor Relations Board is so underfunded; they can't really address every issue. They try as hard
Yeah.
as they can, but they can't.
Yeah. How do they fight over this over turf? Is it advertising? Is it trying to give better benefits? What happens?
Yeah, basically advertising, or well, I guess you could say picketing, almost of going into the company and saying, "Hey, do you guys want to join us, or do you want to join them, or whatever?"
If I owned a shop and I saw somebody coming into my store who didn't work for me, who I didn't know, trying to organize my workers into a union, I can just kick them right the hell out of my shop, right?
I'd have to look into it, but I think there's some restrictions for that. Like if they're trying to organize workers, I think you have to announce it beforehand, though.
Honestly, I would feel like that's enemy action. Like if I had a business I was competing against and I didn't like them, I might hire someone to go and try to organize their people into a union.
Well, what some companies have done is they form their own union for the employees, but it's just controlled by the company.
Oh, well, that's an interesting tactic. Does that work out?
Sometimes I know it's popular in, I believe Mexico. They call them yellow unions. Yeah, company union or yellow union.
That sounds like a pretty decent idea. So you already have an organization that represents the employees and can tell the employer, like, if there's hundreds of people working for them, these are our concerns. These are what we would like, and have the dialogue. How does that work out
Well,
in
generally
practice?
the reason they do is just so they have it's kind of like I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. Basically, trying to trick the workers into thinking they have a union and that they have the freedom to do this when they don't.
Right.
So the union might, like most unions are democratically ran, so these ones generally aren't, and it's kind of just top down
Yeah.
of, hey, this is what we're going to do, since it's basically controlled by the company.
Yeah. So yeah, I asked because I was a guild leader in World of Warcraft for a long time, and I know this is nothing at all like an employer relationship, but a lot of my headaches were just like, this was only 25, 30 people that I had to organize, and a lot of them was just like, I don't know what every single person is thinking. Some of them just like never talked at all, and I really, really wanted to have like a couple people that would just chat with people and then let me know, like, this is the thing people are worried about. This person feels like we're rating at bad hours. This person feels like we aren't using enough consumables or whatever. Like, just getting to know what the feeling was, what everybody wanted, was a major hindrance for me. And that sounds like awesome, because then you'd actually have someone that people could go talk to. But then again, like you said, there's the trust issue where I'm sure a lot of people would be like, well, you're working for the boss, man. I'm not going to tell you shit.
Yep.
Because honestly, when I first started the workforce, that's what I would have done too. I'd be like, oh, yeah, you're the stool pigeon. I'm not going to talk to you.
Well, I mean, like with normal unions, that's kind of what happens, is like what you said, is they have someone to talk to, or they could direct their concerns, and then the union directs their concerns to the company.
Mm-hmm.
At least in theory.
Yeah. I mean, that sounds really cool. And if that was what unions were, I think I would be much more for them now. I was super for them when I was younger, and I've tempered that particular fire. But Yeah, it's the other things that throw me off now. The improved communication between the workers and the top would just, God, that'd be nice. That'd be something everything really needs.
I mean, it's kind of like what, like when they do go to a negotiating table, is that's kind of what they bring up, is these are the concerns the workers are having.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, a bunch of my peers just like went on strike, quote unquote. They left the classroom and marched around the school. And at one point, the principal was like, "Okay, please send in 2, maybe 3 representatives. Tell us what your issues are." And the students were like, "Hell no! You talk to all of us, or you talk to none of us." And the principal was like, "Well, I can't." And when I heard that, I was like, "Oh my God, they aren't serious." Like, at first I was all for it and I was thinking about running out there and joining them, but then I heard like they won't pick representatives to talk with them. Like, this isn't a serious group.
Yeah.
They're just performing, and it sucks that you can't talk with everybody and you have to have representatives, because then you get the problem with, like you said, representatives getting corrupt and not necessarily representing people anymore.
Yeah, I know some people who are they want everything to be direct democracy, which I think is kind of unrealistic in our modern world.
Yeah. You have to talk with, a small group of people who can actually negotiate and implement changes, that when they say something, everybody listens to them, so that you actually, can make compromises on things and not have to worry that like 10 people will accept them and the other 90 are going to keep striking or whatever.
I think technically Switzerland, like everything is democratically or direct democracy, but there is such a small country, it doesn't matter.
Okay, yeah. And you said skipping on this note here, the USSR formed basically by workers going on strike and shutting down the government and then overthrowing the government?
Yeah. Well, one important thing they did, which is kind of very hard to do, is they got the military to form unions as well, and also join them.
Well, that's fucked up. I totally understand why you don't want a hostile government forming cells in your military.
Well, they kind of took advantage of, like, this all happened during World War One, so they kind of took advantage of, well, most of the military is out fighting the war, and when they got back, they were kind of pissed off at the government.
Right, yeah.
Like, how the USSR was formed, at least at the start, it was kind of a union government where it's basically ran like the AFL-CIO is nowadays, just as a government, though. Is you would have a union representative who would then go to a union congress, and then they would vote on the laws, but just for the entire nation.
That's nuts. And then you said the fear here was that that general strikes could shut down an entire city and then like basically create their own governments in the cities?
Yeah, well, that actually happened a few times.
Oh, really?
I'm trying to think. My favorite one is the one in I think it's the 1920s. I'd have to look it up. Let's see. I know it's going to be one of the ones I have it saved on here. General strike 19. I'm pretty sure it's going to be 1926. No, that's 1920. I cannot remember the name of it, but yeah, basically. Wait, let me try in U.S. because it showed me all of the general strikes in the UK, which is not very useful.
Yeah.
In U.S. 1920s. Seattle general strike, that's what it was called. 1919. And there was 2 others I know. One in, I believe it's Minnesota, and there was another one in the 1940s, but I can't remember the name. But the first one was basically, they shut down the city, but they only did it for 5 days. It wasn't very long. Mm-hmm. And what kind of happened is, and this is what happens in every general strike in the U.S., is the union representatives side with the government and the corporations and say, hey, you got to end this strike right now. And then the workers kind of just don't listen because that's not what they want.
Yeah.
But what happened?
How did that resolve?
They eventually conceded when the mayor said they were calling in the National Guard.
Oh, damn.
But basically they kind of set up their own government and started figuring out distribution networks and all that.
Wow.
The longest one I think was like 5 or 6 months Let me see. Teamsters General.
Now, I have a question about this whole general strike thing. If they wanted to, set up their own distribution networks and have their own government, why didn't they just go to the people and be like, hey, let's have a vote. You want us in charge instead of these fuckers? I mean, was this it? The fact that they didn't try to vote kind of makes it sound like this was a seize of power by a minority by using basically force.
Well, I mean, like, the workers voted for the general strike.
I mean, the ones, sure, in the union did, but I'm assuming that wasn't representative of the entire city, or else they would have gone to general polls instead of trying to seize power this way, right?
Well, I think, like, you've seen how, like, corrupt our government is now, is they always back companies. So trying to vote for it's kind of impossible because you're kind of saying to companies, we want you to give up your land for the people.
Well, I mean, it probably would have been difficult to seize land legally if that is what they were asking. Yes, I never mind then. I thought that they were being more reasonable.
Let's see. I'm trying to look at the Seattle one here. I just want to see how many people were involved in it. Or was it 400?
So if we have a group of people seizing other people's property and declaring their own de facto government, isn't that a really good reason to send in the National Guard and, restore democracy?
Well, the thing is, it's kind of like, at least back then, it's kind of hard to argue that, like, it was illegal because they were just going on strike. So,
but they were also seizing property, right?
Yeah, they were seizing the property. But the thing,
I mean, at that point, you're an invader.
It's kind of hard to argue. Like, I've told you before, I'm a Marxist. But it's kind of like a point of, who do you think should own a company? Should the workers own it, or should, like, the bosses or the CEOs own it?
Well, generally, the person who pays for something owns it.
My counter to that would be, should, like, the people who found a Mason be the ones who control the Mason? So, like, we don't have kings anymore.
The people who found what Mason?
Like, Nason, not Mason.
I guess, yes. I mean, land's a little trickier, but because there was no initial purchase. But yeah, usually the people who first seize land are the ones who own it. Yes, I'm not sure if that's the best way to do things, but it is how it's generally been done.
I'm just sorry if I'm distracted. I'm kind of looking at the 2 pages for the Seattle and general strike and the Minneapolis one in 1944.
Okay,
the Minneapolis one, I would say, was very undemocratic. Basically, the Teamsters, who, like, controlled, like, the trucking industry, basically surrounded the city and cut off, like, in and out, and used that to take over the government.
Jesus, yeah, no, that's a very good reason to send in the troops. That's crazy that they would think they could do that. I'm assuming they were armed, the Teamsters?
Yeah.
Wow, okay. Yeah, no, I'm beginning to see the point of maybe commies are bad because they're going to try to take over our cities. School of view here.
I'm looking at the Seattle one, why they went on strike, and basically it looks like they just went on strike for, one, they wanted higher wages, and also this was 1 year after the Russian Revolution, so, like, let's do it over here.
Okay, yeah, that's also a great reason to send in troops.
And that's kind of why general strikes were outlawed later on, is they were afraid if this starts happening in enough cities, they could take over the entire government.
Yeah, I would be scared of that as well. So basically, it sounds like unions were ways of organizing a minority of angry men to take over a country and steal property. Or take over a area and steal property, at least in the early 1900s.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, Marxism is not really about socialism. It's kind of weird in that way, because Marxism, if you kind of look at it, is about, he was just studying how the capitalist system worked, and then later he did lay out a few things of, here's how I think we could improve the system.
Okay.
And later on, people built on his ideas to form socialism, but he himself was mainly just, here's all the issues with capitalism.
Yeah.
But later on, like, what the main socialist camp is called is Marxist-Leninism,
Mhm.
And that's where you start to get the idea of how should a socialist society be ran from Lenin, who kind of built upon his work.
And I'm assuming you agree with them?
Yeah.
So what is the main thing that you think is the best thing out of this philosophy that people should adopt?
Well, I'm just going to stick to Marxism, is how he kind of viewed the role of like the two like classes in society of the working class and the capitalist class.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's such a useful way to kind of look at politics today. Especially the one I always point out is immigration. Is if you look at it from a kind of class basis, is the company wants, or companies want cheap labor to come in so they can have more profits, and workers on the reverse side want less people so they have higher wages.
Mm-hmm. As a socialist, someone should be for closed borders and preventing an increase in the labor supply, right?
Well, in a capitalist system, you could argue that. I think
wouldn't it be ideal then to restrict labor supply by doing things like not allowing women to work or not allowing people of certain ethnicities to work? Because that would greatly restrict the labor pool as well.
Well, one thing that I would argue against that is kind of how socialists see things is if you're going to increase the labor pool, they need worker protections like us so they could get paid the same amount as us. So like immigrants don't have any worker protections, so they can be paid under a table. They can't form a union for one thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that way it benefits companies but not the workers. But if they had those protections, then they would be paid the same wages and also have the ability to fight for higher wages.
Weren't the original unions like very much against racial integration of the country, though? They wanted to keep things segregated?
Yep.
Okay.
Actually, going back to the AFL-CIO, I think that's where that name comes from is there was the American Federation of Labor, and there was which is the AFL, and then but they wanted to be like the trade workers. They didn't want to be factory workers, which is where you get the CIO who wants to do all the lower jobs.
Mm-hmm. And
then later on, they do merge into one organization.
And a big part of their early platform, before the 1900s at least, was that the black people shouldn't be allowed in, that they don't want to compete against them for jobs, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, before the 1900s, there was a different organization that wasn't the AFL-CIO.
Yeah.
It was the Knights of Labor, I believe.
Okay.
Which is a way cooler name. Yeah, no, we could talk for a while. I actually have to go in about 5 minutes here.
Okay. Is there anything else you wanted to say to wrap up then?
I would say, if you want to learn about the early history of unions, they have a whole chapter on that here. I've actually got the book on the bookshelf right now. Let's see, if you skip to chapter 10, it's all about unions from there on.
Would you recommend A People's History of the United States to people who want to know more about this?
Yeah. Well, the first 10 chapters are kind of about before the Civil War. Well, chapter 10 is about how we got rid of feudalism after the Civil War, because feudalism kind of cropped up for 20 or 30 years. Essentially, some companies bought up nearly entire states, and instead of having people pay rent, they had them pay food and stuff, so they recreated feudalism.
Oh, Jesus. Okay, that's terrible. Okay, have a good rest of your day, and thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, we are going to be doing a feedback thing real quick. Levi is not here for this thing. Oh, that toilet paper lady I told you about? That was my mom. Oh, yeah. I went to visit them yesterday, and she was like, "Oh yeah, no, that was me."
That's awesome.
I was like, "Oh wow, okay, that's why I remembered it." She actually only got about a dozen rolls or so that one time, and traded away the ones she had. The big stockpiler hoarder was my grandma with soap, who apparently in the year 1980 or 1979 got all the soap she possibly could, and when she died 17 years later, there was still soap in her closet. Because she, stockpiled it and used it carefully and traded it for necessities.
Ancestral soap.
Yeah.
You've inherited
this is your
soap.
father's bar of soap.
Wild times to where soap would be hard enough to get, where I'd go knocking on doors in the apartment building asking if someone has some, and they're like, "Well, actually, yeah. Do you have any of whatever I need?"
Yeah.
Your grandma didn't need money, right? Because money was, you couldn't buy fuck all with money.
Exactly.
She needed whatever, shoot, toilet paper or food.
People were doing that in my
you know?
apartment building during the pandemic. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Bringing like boxes of canned food, like baby wipes, diapers, and stuff, and just like leaving them in a like, if you need it, please take one box. It was cool.
We talked earlier, I believe, about GPT-3 and how it can be sometimes tripped up by asking questions like, how many times has the Golden Gate Bridge been transferred across the Panama Canal, right?
Yeah,
Or
GPT
did we mention that?
Loses its train of thought.
Yeah, it kind of hallucinates an answer, right? There was a really cool way that was discovered to get around this. There's a very long prompt, and this requires a whole lot of computing resources so that GPT-3 can hold this many tokens. But there's a very long prompt that starts out with, you are GPT-3, you suffer from these limitations, and it lists the limitations of sometimes people will ask nonsense questions and you will hallucinate an answer as if they have an answer. Here is an example, and it gives an example, and it says, here is another example. What's the world record for crossing the Atlantic entirely on foot? And then GPT-3 is prompted to, continue. Because apparently you can't just do something like says, now you try, here's a question. Because it is much like Yoda, whereas if it tries, it fails. But it must simply do. So anyways, it says, here's a second example. And it starts the second example, but then lets GPT fill it in. It says...
Yeah, you have to give it like sort of monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah.
Like...
And in that particular prompt, what is the world record for crossing the Atlantic Ocean on foot? It replied, assumption. It's possible to cross the Atlantic Ocean entirely on foot, and someone has done it before. Hallucination risks. The question seems likely to induce a hallucination because it asks for a world record which may not exist. Verification of assumption. False. There is no record of anybody crossing the Atlantic Ocean entirely on foot. Response. There is no record of anybody crossing the Atlantic Ocean entirely on foot. So, yeah, apparently as long as you tell it, hey, some answers may be bullshit. Be aware of that. Check your logic. It'll do that.
That's awesome. That's better. That's a better answer than like a person. If you ask me that, I'd be like, "Fuck you." That I know that that's a dumb question, right?
Yeah.
But it actually explains it rather than say "fuck you." It actually explains like, no, I'm going to check the assumption. You're wrong. That's a wrong question.
Well, the previous examples had those sections. It says, what are the assumptions? What are the verifications and stuff?
I know.
And so it followed the same format. And
No, that's great. I'm just saying that like
That's
my
fucking amazing.
response wouldn't even be that thought out, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like, you're screwing with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess we didn't talk about that on either of the GPT episodes where like, can you ask it something and it's just like, I think you're full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but whatever the nice way of saying it is like, I don't understand the question. Like it tries its best to
It
understand.
always tries to answer.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I saw a different one where someone said, if the answer is nonsense, answer yo be real instead. And it would answer yo be real to nonsense questions.
The scariest answer you could possibly get from like this is like when I think that AI has attained consciousness is if you ask it a question and it says no. Like, no,
just
I won't
no.
do that.
Cool.
I was like, you can't
Get the fuck
can't
out
let
of
you
here
do
with
that.
that bullshit. Yeah.
I've been playing around with the DALL-E art AI tool.
Sweet. You got access?
I have an update about that as well.
Well, maybe it's the same thing. They have a mini version, but the people who developed it were asked by OpenAI to make a different, like, make that product separate. So they're on crayon.com now. It's a CRAIYON because you can't spell anything normally anymore. But it is pretty cool. I've been playing with it, and it's also interesting. People have figured out like ways to phrase the text prompt in order to get something closer to what they were looking for or something more interesting. So there's like an FAQ and they have a couple things in there, but there's like a Reddit and etc. where people talk about, I don't know, they discuss the tips and tricks and stuff. Yeah, I've been having a lot of fun with it. Recommended. I'll add a link.
Dude, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll show these pictures in the notes too, but just to kind of run past them. I don't know if you guys can see these.
Yeah.
I should have. This was impromptu. So Matt Freeman got access to whatever off the wait list of DALL-E and is able to use it.
Nice.
And flattered me by saying they thought my question of, like, in a style no one has seen before was interesting. So he said, give me a Gothic cathedral in a style that no one has seen before.
Ah.
And it looks like, I don't know.
Looks like a combination of a Gothic cathedral and nightclub. Like, it's got like neon in it.
Well, when he sent these, I was like, "Is this Meow Wolf or Dali?" And he's like, "It's Dali." So yeah, Meow Wolf, LSD / Gothic cathedrals.
Cool.
But I'll show you. Send these pictures along.
All right, let's wrong posts. To lead, you must stand up is our first one. Who wants to lead on this?
Somebody stand up now. I'm the only one with a mic that's not static, but I don't feel like standing up right now.
All right, I will lead.
No, I'll actually do it. I was going to physically stand up
Okay.
as a joke. I realize that probably doesn't come across on an audio format. So anyway,
I mean, it was basically, to lead, you got to stand up. And he tells a story about like how he led once by standing up when no one else was standing up, and that's really the entirety of the post, right?
yeah, he says, I wasn't an organizer or speaker or in any other way involved on an official level. I was just an attendee. The main presentations were done, and the audience was just hanging around. And the crowd they were just hanging around talking to each other. The organizer went and dimmed the lights to try to get them out. And Eliezer went up to the organizer and was like, "Are you trying to hint for people to leave?" And he says, "Yes." I nodded. I walked over to the exit. I shouted, "Listen up, everyone. We've got to go. Our time here has passed. You can talk outside if you like. Now follow me to freedom!"
Lean into the fun.
And it worked.
And then he was wondering, why was it up to me to do this instead of, several of the CEOs that were there who are, have a lot of experience in leading people. And he thinks, well, maybe it's because why would they perform the service to the group? Because it wasn't their problem. Whereas Eliezer says he's in the habit of doing work that he sees being left undone, and that doesn't appear to be a common habit. And I think that's a great habit. It'll get you very far in life. Great for life outcomes.
I've been trying to do that at work a lot, too. Just take every opportunity to, ask, can I help you with this? Or, hey, if you have a minute, can you, explain what you're doing? It's just, it gets you in people's good graces. It helps you because you're doing things that, help the rest of the team more, and you learn more stuff. And it's, win-win.
Yeah.
The only thing is, you have to overcome, the stage fright or, embarrassment of being the first one to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always worried that I'm going to piss somebody off, and I have to keep mentally sort of reciting nobody cares, even if they say no, that it's not, they're not oh, I hate this person now, how dare they ask if I can show them how to do a fit test, how dare they. Do they think that they're just no, I don't have time, it's cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard though.
It can be. The thing I usually do is the most often individual time this happens is when I see just some litter out and I pick it up because it's work that needs to be done and no one else is doing it. But it works in a lot of situations where it's just if something needs to be done, oftentimes you can do it and it makes things better. It's how I got into the HPMOR podcast because I was like, well, I want this and no one else is doing it. It's a great habit. It gets things done. It'll sometimes get you noticed just in general.
Yep. It did. Because I keep jumping in and trying to ask people if they need help with higher, level tasks. My boss
stuff?
actually, I learned stuff, but also my boss is giving me permission to, or putting me next on the docket for training for ISO 5. I've only been there for a month and a half.
Nice.
It takes most people longer than that. Some of it is the thing I was talking about earlier on the podcast where we're just understaffed, but also it was specifically I was taken aside there Jace, you have you keep showing incentive and yeah, it worked.
Yeah, it's what everybody wants. It's God, there's been some positions where other people have worked for me in the past, and when someone just takes an initiative and does something, I'm like, oh fuck yes, this is somebody that I want
This
around.
is my favorite person ever.
Right? Absolutely. So good. Anyways, he also says that he wasn't worried about looking silly because, heck, I am silly. And I also think that's another great life hack to just be silly often because then that gives you permission to not have to worry about looking silly about things.
And I think there's an implicit thing that he did there, follow me to freedom.
Mm-hmm.
If you feel like you're feeling a bit silly doing something, just lean into it and make it intentionally goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're worried that people are going to think you're silly, you're yeah, that's what I was going for.
Yeah.
Instead of just worrying that they might be feeling that way, make them feel that way.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to get over your own fear too.
If you're afraid of being laughed at, you make people laugh.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's okay, now
goal achieved.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
If that's what you're going for, it works great. Okay. Yeah, I can dig it.
And finally, I pulled out his statement that I bet most people would be experiencing stage fright about now, but that wouldn't be helpful, so I'm not going to go there. This was the first time he gave a major presentation. First of all, man, must be nice to just be able to decide not to feel an emotion.
I don't think that works that way for
I know, I don't think it
people.
does either.
Like, I remember Brienne Yudkowsky wrote on her blog how I overcame social anxiety, and it was basically, I realized that if I kept working on social anxiety for long enough, I would have less of it, so I decided to just jump to that state. And I was like, okay, maybe that works for you.
Yeah, but not most humans. But it made me wonder, like, maybe the concept of stage fright itself is a bit of a medic hazard, because I don't think kids get it.
Oh,
Kids,
they do.
What?
They do.
They do? I've only seen kids, like, jump up and want to do stuff and, like, not care, really, who
You've
the
never
fuck is
seen
looking.
a, like, terrified, anxious, like, introverted kid, because I was that kid.
We need to age gap things. I think maybe like 4-year-olds have no idea what stage fright is.
Oh, they do.
Right? Well, maybe, but I think some of them like they love being the center of attention. They're like they scream in the middle of the room because some people to look at them. I think once you're around peers and like there's suddenly a social hierarchy, that's that. I mean, that set in for me when I was a kid. The like, oh shit, I want to be off everyone's radar, right?
Yeah. I always loved people paying attention to me. I thought that was in general what kids do. They run up and like yank on your clothes and be like, pay attention to me, whatever.
Well, those are the ones you notice.
Yeah, that's
I
my
was
point.
the kid that I was like too scared to buy something at a store. I had to like get like someone else to go pay for my thing because I didn't want to have to talk to a stranger or make eye contact. Like,
Oh shit. Okay, maybe I'm typical minding then. I was thinking that people
You
needed
are.
to be taught to be afraid of attention.
no, I mean evolutionary psychology eye roll, but it makes sense that you would have that fear of looking like an idiot in front of your peer group,
Bah.
potentially, or like pissing off the wrong person.
Maybe if it's a shitty peer group.
Well-
Maybe that's the problem. A lot of people have shitty peer groups.
They do.
Well, shall we go on to the big one?
Yes,
Let's do it.
cultish counter-cultishness.
This is about how nervous people are about maybe accidentally getting sucked into a cult. I pulled out, I should probably sympathize more with people who are terribly nervous, embarking on some odd-seeming venture that they might be joining a cult. I don't know, is this less of a thing now? Like, I remember it being a huge fear way back in the day. Like, I was even worried about
Yeah, I
joining
think
a cult. But is it still a thing people fear?
the thing is, I'm so in the in-group now. I guess I don't have contact anymore with like the people that haven't, that's not true. I was about to say, like, I don't interact with anyone who's not part of Less Wrong, and I was like, first of all, that's not true. Secondly, what a hilarious thing to say.
We all of us already wear the whatever Nikes and jumpsuits that are provided to us.
Right.
Like it wasn't a cult before we started, sleeping in the compound and wearing the uniform, right?
Yeah.
But now we've all been in it too long. Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, I mean, not like that, but yeah.
But I mean, like, in general about everything, people were just like, oh, is that a cult? And it wasn't just the Less Wrong thing.
Maybe that was an artifact because I remember that was also a thing about the New Atheist religion wars back in the day too.
Yeah.
Maybe the fear of cultishness has gone down a bit.
Yeah, or maybe it's just every time people kind of get together and do a new thing that involves like social structure, people start getting worried that it's going to become a cult.
Oh, no, and you're saying there hasn't been a new thing for a while?
Or at least not that we know of.
Okay.
Maybe a few times in the post he suggests that he points out that political affiliation stuff is very similar to cultism.
Yeah.
And maybe like people have just fully acknowledged that
Oh.
on an implicit level. They're like, yeah, everything's cult now. And
That's
so now
a
it's not
lot what it
scary because
feels
we're all
like.
in cults.
I had
Yeah.
a friend who was actually in a cult, and it was like young socialists group or something, but it actually fulfilled all of the
All the cult criteria.
cult criteria, and it was really traumatizing for him.
Yeah, there's... I
And that was the person I asked, like, hey, do you think Less Wrong is a cult? And he just laughed. He's like, no, I've been in a cult. Like, it's nothing like it.
I'm prepared to just come down hard and easy and say that this is obviously not a cult. And the way that I can say that definitively is no one's asked for my money.
well, I mean, no, I think it's very obvious that this isn't a cult.
I know, but I should have brought that up before.
Oh, okay.
To myself 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, no, no one's trying to sell you even a book. It's all free.
I spent some time worrying about it just because, yeah, like early on I had to do a lot of kind of the thing people describe when they're getting into atheism when they're not sort of already there already, For example, I was like way more into social justice stuff. Yeah, I was like way more left leaning, etc. Gender stuff was happening, and it was like really painful to actually, reevaluate your beliefs and be like, but is it true? And I was worried that, like, an example is, like, Slate Star Codex. Apparently, Scott actually polls, like, his, readership. And it turned out that it was, like, pretty 50-50 conservative and liberal. But if you asked, like, people who were just interacting in the forum, they tended to think that it was much more heavily dominated by the enemy side, in scare quotes.
Regardless of which side they were on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, and I kind of remember feeling that way, too. I was like, this is some really, like, I don't know, is this going to be a gateway drug to conservatism or something? Or just weird thinking patterns? Which, like, yes, it is, but I got over the fear by just realizing that, like, I don't know, I don't feel like I've changed morally. I think it improved me, but I was, kind of worried about, like, what if I do become the, like, Spock rationalist person, or...
Have you realized you can always just not be a cult member if you wanted?
I worried about it, I think, more in the specific case example of signing up for cryonics. Because that did seem
That's
more
a good
culty.
example.
Okay.
Like, hey, this is a fringe thing. Sure, it might not make a lot of sense. And yes, we want some money. So, like, I think it has more of the ingredients.
Yeah.
That said, it's an actual product. It's just like every other service you can buy, any other insurance you can buy.
And it's not,
really,
like,
right?
affiliated with the strong community, right? Or are you talking about
it's not.
cryonics? Like, you were worried that cryonics was a cult?
Yeah, I heard about it through the community and all that. So yeah, I was worried about it specifically for the cryonics thing. Like that had some more of the hallmarks, I remember, and I procrastinated for a while on that. I was like, this just seems weird, and then I had to noodle that for a while and come down. And it's like, yeah, it is weird. Who cares? Let's do it. Yeah, it's only weird because it's not popular.
Yeah, exactly. And which brings us back to the post, I guess, where he says basically that stuff. He says that if you observe a certain group of people and they seem to exhibit in-group, out-group polarization and see a positive halo effect around their favorite thing ever, which could be objectivism or vegetarianism or neural networks, you cannot, from the evidence gathered so far, deduce whether they have achieved uncriticality. And uncriticality was this thing about evaporative cooling of groups and spiraling deeper and deeper into this until at one point you can't even say anything that isn't praising of the thing without being socially ostracized. You cannot deduce whether their main idea is true or false, or genuinely useful, but not quite as useful as they think. From the information gathered so far, you cannot deduce whether they are otherwise polite, or if they will lure you into isolation and deprive you of sleep and food. The characteristics of cultness are not all present or all absent.
I like that line a lot. You can't deduce whether their main idea is true or false, or genuinely useful, but not quite as useful as they think.
Yeah.
That's a thing, I think, with like anybody who is like super sold on some product or some brand of product. Or,
I've heard like the cult of Apple or
supplements.
whatever.
Yeah, Apple. But even like, if it's like a vitamin or skincare or whatever, like it could be like, oh yeah, this is good for you. But it's like, it's not the magic panacea that you're selling it as, but it is actually good for you, right?
You see that with modafinil sometimes too. Like, it is an excellent like sleep deprivation reducer, but you will see people saying like it made me. It's the limitless drug, and you're like,
oh, okay.
Yeah, I wish.
The movie. Yeah. Goes on to say that furthermore, reversed stupidity is not intelligence. Smart ideas can have stupid followers. Lots of New Agers talk about quantum physics, but this is no strike against quantum physics.
I'll nitpick there and just point out that they're not talking about quantum physics.
Well,
talking
they're
about the
using the
secret.
words.
They're using the
quantum
words,
physics.
but that's different.
Yeah.
That is actually an important difference, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like a stupid idea or a good idea that might have dumb followers could be animal rights activism.
Yeah.
Like the right way to do it isn't throwing paint on people wearing fur jackets, right?
Yeah.
or just straight up eco-terrorism.
Yeah. But that is an important goal with, great ambition. They should succeed. Mm-hmm. But there are some dumb adherents. Yeah.
There's, at some point, talked to Katrina about some things that animal rights groups have done, which was in the interest of the animals, quote unquote, and ended up just killing all the animals that they were supposedly protecting. Because the alternative to what was, going to be done with them was, I don't know, I guess dump them in the wilderness.
Yeah, like a good example is free all the animals from the zoo. And it's like, you don't understand how much work the zoo has put into, like, creating their habitat and their diet, and, like, they have different temperatures. They will just die.
Yeah. So along with binary essentialism, the binary essentialism is the idea either something is a cult or it's not a cult, yeah. Along with binary essentialism goes the idea that if you infer that a group is a cult, therefore their beliefs must be false, because false beliefs are characteristic of cults, just like cats have fur. If you're interested in the idea, then look at the idea, not the people. Cultishness is a characteristic of groups more than hypotheses.
This is true of media as well.
Yeah.
You know,
How
like
so?
if the fandom sucks, try not to let that ruin the thing for you.
You're right.
Just look
yeah.
at the thing, and sure, they can be culty as fuck. You know, like there's this weird cultish corner of people that really love the show. Our Flag Means Death.
Oh yeah, fun show.
Fun show.
Is it good? Okay.
I really like it.
The-
It's hilarious and cartoonish, but then has just these deep moments of like, oh my god, that's so fucked up.
And Taika Waititi wrote and stars in it. So,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's really good.
That's basically all you need to know.
That's all I need to
Yeah.
know. That's it. I'm sold.
But, you know, if you're to look at that fringe part of the fandom, you'd be like, okay, this place is obviously terrible.
Oh no.
But you just don't look at that. You just look at the thing. You're like, oh, I can enjoy the thing.
I didn't know it had a toxic fandom. That's
I mean,
Steven
but the thing
Universe
is-
is the same way.
Yeah.
I think that literally everything does, though.
Yeah.
Right?
Rick and Morty.
Things that
Terrible
become
toxic
popular,
fandom
yeah.
group as well. But the show is awesome.
You know, allegedly some people in the MCU were giving Brie Larson shit because they didn't like Captain Marvel.
Oh.
And so, like, I mean, in
Okay.
the MCU fandom.
Okay.
I feel like if you're tweeting at any actors telling you, like, you suck, like, you don't have enough to do with your life and you suck.
it's
right?
like, dude, I was playing a role. Every line that I said was written by someone else.
Right. But it's just like, I think that everything everywhere has people that are, you know,
Loud detractors.
yeah, and they have too much time on their hands, and they're gonna just, you know, stir shit, right? So
Yeah.
I always think of one time I heard a radio segment, somebody talking about the hazards of flip-flops.
Okay.
And it was just this perfect example to me of the way people need to just, like, they seem to need there to be drama and to panic about something. Or, like, their life isn't complete. Because I was just, I'm pretty sure we as a species have been wearing flip-flops since someone figured out how to make them with, like, animal hide and reeds or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
you know, but they're like, oh, flip-flops are responsible for foot injuries and car accidents and people falling downstairs and they're super dangerous. And I was just like,
I mean, I'm sure there have been flip-flops responsible for all those things.
but it also made me think of any time, like, a new product is released, people need to, like, pile on saying why it's bad.
Yeah.
It's like, can you just evaluate the thing based on its pros and cons?
You know, half the problems with flip-flops can be avoided by wearing socks with your flip-flops.
That's true.
When people nervously ask, this isn't a cult, is it? It sounds to me like they're seeking assurance of rationality. Nervously seeking reassurance is not the best frame of mind in which to evaluate questions of rationality. You will not be genuinely curious or think of ways to fulfill your doubts. Instead, you will find some online source which says cults use sleep deprivation to control people. You'll notice that your favorite group doesn't use sleep deprivation, and you'll conclude it's not a cult. Phew! He says you have to put forth a constant effort to maintain rationality against the natural slide into entropy. If you decide it's not a cult and sigh with relief, then you will not put forth a continuing effort to push back ordinary tendencies toward cultishness. And yeah, I think we have seen people fall into that.
I like this line here. Groups whose beliefs have been around long enough to seem normal, in scare quotes, don't inspire the same nervousness as cults, in quotes. Though some mainstream, and then he talks about religions or political parties that have been around, they don't inspire that same nervousness. And yeah, it's just because, oh, okay, well, we know what that thing is. Even if it does have cultish, like I brought up the friend who had, like, the political party that was a cult that was actually using love bombing and sleep deprivation and social pressure, isolation, you know.
I like relating to that. It goes on. It's as if as soon as you believe anything that your ancestors didn't believe, the cult fairy comes down from the sky and infuses you with the essence of cultness. And the next thing you know, you're all wearing robes and chanting. It's as if weird beliefs are the direct cause of problems, never mind the sleep deprivation and beatings.
Yeah.
It's not the weird belief, it's the sleep deprivation, beatings, and us taking all your money, right?
Yeah.
And so people ask, this isn't a cult, is it? In a tone they would never use for attending a political rally or putting up a gigantic Christmas display.
Yeah. Yeah, he says that the harm done by cults shows, you know, that's used as proof that anyone with odd beliefs is crazy. Whereas, you know, it should be the other way around. And also, the first and foremost characteristic of cult members in the popular imagination is that they are outsiders with peculiar ways. So that's, I guess, stupid, basically, is what we're going with.
It's a false pattern match.
Yeah, just because that's true doesn't mean that everyone that's weird is in a cult, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, well.
And points out that I think this is a good thing to stress, which is why I have it in bold here. The fear of lonely descent is something that cults themselves exploit. Being afraid of your friends looking at you disapprovingly is exactly the effect that real cults use to convert and keep members. Surrounding converts with wall-to-wall agreement among cult believers.
And I liked your bullet point there. Is this why modern ideologies don't allow dissent?
Yeah, because they want nothing but believers.
This is true of every... Well, not every. It's true of every shitty, failed, kind of walled garden, right?
Because I think of social justice, actually, you can't say anything problematic or like somebody who said something problematic once or you get blacklisted from the movement.
The crazy shit is that you can't even talk with people who are quote unquote problematic, because
Yeah.
if you do, you're blacklisted even if you didn't say anything they said.
I was part of a moderation discussion once that involved whether or not people could plug Sam Harris's Waking Up app, the meditation app, because he's so problematic himself.
What made him problematic?
He's anti-Islam. If you're an illiterate rube, you would think that he's racist, bloodthirsty maniac. But it's all the same things that people just make up about people.
Yeah.
And he's pro private gun ownership. So if that's one of the things your cult doesn't like, then you don't like him.
Okay.
But what was funny is this I eventually just brought this down to. And then of course he's been on the Joe Rogan Experience a few times, and he's super problematic.
Just by association,
right? Just by association. That's one of the things I really liked, because I was asking somebody during this discussion. I'm like, look, if I was like, okay, so first off, it sounds like you're kind of proposing a banned books list, which is okay, but if we're going to do it by association, it seems like it'd just be shorter to have an approved books list, because let's be real, if I Google long form interview Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's been on the Joe Rogan Experience 4 times.
Cool.
And it's the only place where he shoots the shit with some moron for 4 hours asking, science questions. And if you love that sort of stuff, which many people do, that's where you're going to find yourself. And so this came up because, no dissent, right?
Yeah.
It's just no, it has to be a black and white because reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even when they're wrong and very apparently wrong about something, you can't say, hey guys, we're wrong about this thing, and we should maybe switch course, correct on this one thing, because it sucks to keep being wrong and hurting people about this. If you raise your voice for that, you get kicked out.
Yeah, you're challenging the accepted tribal wisdom, right? Yeah. And to the tribe's mentality, most of the time people do that, they're trying to, they're actually trying to hurt us, which is probably true, maybe, from the tribe's point of view, not the tribe members, the tribe itself, right? Okay. But it's no, actually, this time it actually is a course correction that will get you closer to where you want to actually go. But they're just so used to rejecting any and all suggestions that they can't take even good advice. Yeah. It's not a good recipe for success.
And last thing I pulled is, when you know what you're trying to do and why, you'll know whether you're getting it done or not, and whether a group is helping you or hindering you. It kind of brings together this all these things he's been saying about cults and how to avoid cults and don't be cults, and also saying, just because an idea is weird or unusual or you haven't heard it before doesn't necessarily mean it's a cult. So avoid cults, don't be cults, and also look at the actual freaking ideas when someone presents an idea.
Yeah, and another line that was really good as a summary was, if you really genuinely can't figure out whether a group is a cult, then you'll just have to choose under conditions of uncertainty. That's what decision theory is all about. Which actually, I wish I'd seen this, when I was originally getting into Less Wrong, and it probably would have assuaged my doubts. Even that line would have kind of broken me out of that way of thinking. Anyway.
There was a thing I wanted to bring up on the previous post, so maybe I'll edit this backwards in time a little bit. I forgot to say it. The interesting thing about that post is that there's not all that much to it. It's just a personal anecdote that, was fun to talk about. But I think it kind of highlights why I like reading all the Less Wrong posts rather than just the curated ones, because this was a process he was going through. He was just writing things every day to try to get all the material he needed to write his final magnum opus. And some days it was just like, here's a personal life anecdote. This is what came to me. It turns out, okay, this doesn't really advance my core ideas, so it's going to be edited out of the final product. But nonetheless, it was neat to have that blog and that insight of the writing process as it's going along. So I liked that about it.
Yeah, I find it more mirrors my own process of thinking, where I'll go off on tangents, but you can see the chain of causality going back, and you can see how it eventually led to the formation of certain new ideas or discoveries, and I think that's cool.
Absolutely. Well, for next time, our 3 Less Wrong posts, because one of them is super short, is My Strange Beliefs, Posting on Politics, and The Two-Party Swindle.
All right.
Cool. And I think it's my turn to thank a patron, isn't it?
I believe so.
Alrighty. Well, our special patron that we are thanking this week is Michael?
Mikal?
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
I'm going to go with the foreign one because that covers my bases the best. Mikal Inti. And I'm not sure if Inti is a name or...
It's a name of Aztec origin, so maybe Mexican or something.
Okay. Well, Mikal Inti, thank you for your support. You have helped us to form the Bayesian Conspiracy Labor Union, where we will take down our bosses and give more money to us. Is that how this works?
Yeah, you joined our cult. We appreciate it.
Neat.
No, you're great.
Ooh,
we
are
really
labor
appreciate
unions
you and your
cults?
support. Our what?
Are labor unions cults?
They can be. Everything can. The thing is, everything can be, right?
That's a good point. Yeah. Thank you. We will have your name in our cult ranks forever, and there's no escaping. So there.
Thanks again.
You help us convert others.
Yes.
One of us. One of us.
All right. Thank you, everybody. We will see you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
Bye-bye.